across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Good evening, my patriots, my delectable audience, you lovely, wonderful human beings. Thank you for being here for me. I'm going to be here for you for the next 3 hours, offering you up a little bit of free therapy. That's right. You know what it is. It's the time we all get together and share in some communal catharsis. Get it off your chest. You're not alone. If you're despairing at the state of the world, well, guess what? Everybody else hearing my voice right now is probably feeling the same way. Maybe that's because they're listening to me. Who knows? But I think a lot of the country seems to feel that way, don't they? But don't you worry. We're here for one another. I tell you what was quite uplifting, actually. I was just driving into London from the Shire, and all the way down the M4, every single motorway bridge, I saw St George's Cross, and I was like, yes, get in there. Come on, England. That I felt like, yes, the patriots are here. We've taken back the flag. We're going to take back control. We're going to tell everybody what we want, and this time they're going to listen. At least that is the plan. But no, there's plenty of us around. We actually far outnumber the lunatic left, who are all raving narcissists, by the way, and I have the receipts for that. I wrote an article on it myself just yesterday. We're going to be speaking to a psychologist about why the left are actually just narcissists. So stay tuned for that one. We're also going to be talking about another incident of a migrant sexually assaulting a girl. This is our good friend over in Epping, the one who started it all off, bragging about how much he paid to get in on his little dinghy. We're going to be speaking to the wonderful Isabel Oakeshott about that, as well as all of the political news of the day, including still mopping up Nigel Farage's announcement yesterday. Will he do a deal with the Taliban? I mean, that's what Sir Keir Starmer's going to bang on about, isn't he? That's going to be his sort of go-to pull lever, break glass for emergency quote from now on, I reckon. But we're going to actually try and look into this a bit more, slice and dice it, get to the bottom of how this might work, what sort of roadblocks are going to be in the way, what sort of obstacles may have to be traversed, how prepared they have to be, because this is going to be one hell of a battle against the establishment. Ho ho! If you think that Brexit was gnarly, wait till we start mass deportations. I mean, that is going to be quite the spectacle. We're also going to be talking about Elon Musk, who has sort of had a bit of a reprieve from messing about in UK politics and Xing about us, but he seems to have decided it's time to shine a spotlight on Britain again. What is he up to? And also, good old Lord Hermer, everyone's favourite villain, the man who is basically the marionette controller to old Lego head Sir Keir Starmer, the power behind the scenes, the raving Marxist who happened to be Sir Keir's best mate down at the Doughty Law Chambers, where they were both barristers, where Lord Hermer seemed to take on every single case of every ne'er-do-well who had an issue with the UK's national interest. Well, he's now employed a spad whose rap doesn't really look much better, so we're going to be talking about that as well. And then in the final hour, we're going to be joined by the brilliant, erudite, informative James Melville to, well, talk about even more stories, including kids getting fat jabs. So a lot coming up, a lot to discuss, a lot of free therapy to be had. And don't you worry, unlike playing telephone tombola and trying to get through to your GP in the morning, it's pretty efficient here because the lovely Faith is in charge, and she is an absolute dab hand at making sure the machine is well oiled and is working as to be expected. So if you give this number a call, 0344 499 1000, Faith will pick up the phone to you, do a little bit of mild vetting, make sure you're not too unhinged, not so unhinged that you're going to land me in broadcaster's prison or out of work. And if you pass muster, according to her, then you get to speak to me if you so wish. And I'd love to speak to you, because that's what it's all about. Sharing is caring. It's your normal network rate as well, so it basically doesn't cost you anything. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed, you can leave me a little voice note on WhatsApp. I do like those. I don't know why I like them, but I just really like them. I think it's because you don't know what's coming up. All I get on my little Cape Canaveral screen here is the name of the person, voice notes, and then the duration. And so I say, oh, let's listen to Derek. And then all of a sudden it plays, and I don't know what to expect. And I just enjoy it. It's like sort of a little miniature broadcasting Christmas cracker with a gift inside. So if you'd fancy sending me one of those, it is the long number for WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send me a text message. If you're a little bit old school and you think SMS is still cutting edge technology, it ain't. And it so isn't that you've actually got to tell it where to go, which means you've got to write the word talk before you type out your message, and that number is 87222. Okay, right. Shall we get on with it then? Because I'm joined now by the incredible, inimitable, one of my favourite women on this earth. She is a Boudica. It's Isabel Oakeshott. Good evening, Is.
Good evening. Do you always call Keir Starmer Lego head? Because I love this. Did you make it up?
I did make it up because his hairstyle looks like a sort of plastic.
That is exactly what he is. For so long, I've been trying to put my finger on what it is he reminds me of. And now you've absolutely nailed it.
But also Rachel Reeves as well. There's a whole Lego, the whole Lego coiffure going on.
A Lego set, yeah.
Yeah. Basically, if you want to be on the front bench of the Labour Party, you've got to have sinus issues and a hairstyle that looks like it's made by Mattel. And if you have those things, well, hey, you get to hold a great office of state. At least that's what it appears.
Happy days.
Now, let's talk about a topic that, do you remember about a year ago or so, Is we were talking about stuff like this as women, about the threats to women's safety and security from all of these unchecked men coming over the channel on boats, coming from countries where they haven't even seen the glimpse of an ankle, all the way through puberty, and then getting their smartphone and going, well, hey, I want to go to Britain and enjoy some of that. What could have gone wrong? Well, here we are. It's now a big topic of conversation. Everybody's talking about it, and there's a case happening at the moment. We've got to tread carefully because it is a live case, but this is Hadush Kabatu, who is the Ethiopian, I believe, or was Eritrean, from that neck of the woods, who was allegedly sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. And we're beginning to hear some details coming out of that court case. You there, Is? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I wonder what you'll take on what you think of the court case.
Do you know what I thought was about to happen there, just to explain the long pause, which wasn't me just being incredibly wowed by your introduction there. You said we'd been hearing some details, and I thought we were going to hear some clips.
Oh, we thought there was going to be some live action material. Yeah. Unfortunately not.
Thinking, wow, are we now getting our cameras inside court? That's something new. So look, what I think about this in the broadest terms is that these cases that we are now hearing about and that are getting a little bit more coverage are just a fraction of what is really going on. And I tell you why I say that. I've got two bits of experience in the last 24 hours, really. One looking into a very serious allegation in the Bournemouth area, which I sort of hesitate to go into detail. Maybe we'll save it up for another programme. But in short, it's a very, very serious potential crime there. And a lot of talk about it there, number of people who've got a bit to say about it. I've not really been able to nail this. And to say the police are being tricky would be diplomatic on my part. So there's something there. I don't know what it is, but it represents an issue, I think, that is replicated across the country, which is this culture of cover-up that people know is going on. If this thing didn't happen, then how is it that so many people are talking about it? And if they have all got the wrong end of the stick, we're back where we were with the whole Southport thing, aren't we? Rumours going round and nobody putting out any information that sets the record straight.
Yeah.
And the thing is, this very relatively new, I've been a journalist for a very long time, a new threshold in newspaper reporting, which makes it quite difficult to report things that can't be absolutely copper bottom substantiated. And that is a whole new shift certainly in newspaper reporting, maybe different in broadcasting, but where we're now being told, actually, you can't even say that there is talk in this particular town of this having happened, I can't substantiate it, but I'm simply reporting that this is what people are saying, that is now liable to get a newspaper into trouble.
Really? So how? Like, what's happening? Is this sort of number 10 picking up the phone to newspaper editors? Is this the police? I mean, what is the mechanism by which this is now being controlled so heavy-handedly?
This is the press watchdog, Ipso. So, I mean, I'm in a whole new world here with a lot of this stuff. I'm finding that things that I want to write, I can't get into the newspaper. Things that would have sailed in previously, appropriately caveated. And I think that it's really worrying me, actually, because I think that it means that, okay, I get what the aim is, and we all have a responsibility, absolutely, not to spread misinformation or disinformation. And don't we all know how Lucy Connolly paid the price for that? And none of us want to be that person. But at the same time, news reporting, news coverage, has never been able to rely on written consent from everybody that you're talking about. It's another issue I had quite recently. Wanted to write about bacon. Do you know what I mean by the bacon story? The guy that said the British like bacon, we love bacon, outside on the site of a proposed mosque, and got arrested. And I wanted to write about that and use his name. And nowadays, the threshold is you need to get written consent from the person who's been arrested. What? Come on. I kind of, on one hand, there's so much covering up going on because people are worried it's going to be the straw that breaks a camel's back, aren't they? That it will be the final thing, the blue touch paper that makes the country take to the streets and, the tinderbox explodes. But we can also have reached a situation where the truth is so toxic that instead everyone has to be permanently gaslit and muzzled. And I just think this is really worrying. There are a whole different set of things going on here, but happening in parallel, which are contributing to a lot of misinformation, which is the opposite of the intention, because people are being gagged and suppressed and people are frightened. And, newspapers cannot afford to spend their whole time dealing with legal complaints. And often those complaints are not by the person who was named or perhaps caught up in something and didn't deserve to be identified. They're put in by political organisations, for political purposes. And on that note, I have the greatest of sympathy with the owners of newspapers, with newspaper organisations, and it's the same for broadcasters. We can't spend all our resources fighting endless legal letters. But at the same time, there's got to be a balance. Otherwise, how does the truth actually ever see the light of day? Now, where did our conversation begin? It began with yet another alleged, really horrible alleged assault by somebody who's come to this country and taken what they can from the British taxpayer and repaid the public in this alleged manner. And I think this is going on, I'm afraid, up and down the country. And people are really, really justifiably worried about it. Yeah. Of course, the vast majority of migrants don't behave this way. We shouldn't have to say that, but let me spell that out anyway.
But I mean, this is the interesting thing. Going back to Bournemouth, actually, not long ago, maybe about a month ago or something, I had kept picking up on stories in Bournemouth. And I did a Google News search and looked at things that have happened in Bournemouth. And then I found out somebody had actually put an FOI into Dorset's police for the amount of reported rapes and sexual assaults in Bournemouth. And the statistics on that, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was over 100 in a year, but they had essentially doubled in the space of about 5 years. And we know that Bournemouth is somewhere where there are now a lot of migrant hotels, old seaside hotels. But also, one thing I'm noticing as somebody who travels about the country, tries to get around the place, love this nation, love a bit of a staycation, is that there is, without a doubt, when these men are coming over on the small boats from countries where women otherwise have to dress in burqas and niqabs and all the rest of it, they cannot wait to go to the British seaside or stand in the back of a nightclub and see young women cavorting without many clothes on. It's number one on their bucket list. I'm beginning to think actually some of these men are not just economic migrants, but essentially sex tourists. And this is a conversation we need to have, because what do people expect to happen? If these young men have been brought up in such a sexually repressed society where it is shameful, it is punishable, potentially even with violence, for a woman to even show her barnet out in public, then of course when they come to the West, where there is sexual liberty, and not just sexual liberty, but increasingly a hypersexualized society, they're going to think it's the field of dreams. They don't just have a lobotomy when they arrive on our coast. They don't suddenly get programmed with 10, 20 years worth of sexual and cultural mores that the rest of us have been brought up with. And so they behave in a way that is utterly unacceptable and poses a threat to girls. And I don't understand why grown men who are in charge of this country, whose duty of care should be to the most vulnerable, cannot seem to have those words leave their mouth.
Well, absolutely right. I mean, I hadn't thought of it in the way that you've just expressed it. You know, I often talk about economic opportunists, but maybe actually we should start talking about sexual opportunists. And I'm sorry, but as you say, that is quite demonstrably a reality in a number of cases. Of course, it's going to be the minority, but one is too many. You know, why is it that we allow people to come in this manner? They break into our country, they then commit offences, and then they're not deported, and it isn't an automatic disqualification to their asylum claim. I mean, I would set the threshold for breaking the law again after you've already broken the law by coming into our country illegally. I would set the threshold for any further flouting of the law pretty much one up from a parking ticket, and you shouldn't be driving anyway if you're an illegal migrant. That's a whole other story. You know, how is it so many of them seem to be able to get behind the wheel rather too quickly? But that's another investigation to be done. As it is, we let some of these people commit multiple crimes and we still grant them asylum. What the heck?
I know. Oh, it's utterly ridiculous. I just cannot understand how we now live in society where the safety of women and girls is totally sacrificable. I don't understand at all why we give precedence to we beatify these men who, and this is the other thing, Isabel, right? I've realised that all of those people standing outside the migrant hotels going, aren't they wonderful, aren't they nice, you're all wayfished, the poor things, they're so vulnerable, they deserve our care, they've suffered all this persecution, they've had to get into a small boat. Those people, as far as I'm concerned, are the racists, because they look at these men, these young men with brown skin, and they think that they're victims, they think that they're weak, they think they're incapable, they think that they're effeminate. When I see those young men coming on boats, I think they look physically fit. I think they look canny. I think they're savvy and streetwise. They know how to hustle. I think they're brave if they've decided they're going to cross various continents, various countries in an unknown continent. They're clearly, you know, quite capable and industrious if they're able to get their hands on, you know, a couple of £1,000s in order to pay traffickers. They're not afraid of rubbing shoulders with criminals. They're not afraid of doing what it takes. And what's more, I don't look at them as if they're some sort of, you know, effeminate eunuchs who don't pose any threat or don't have any sexual urges or desires. I also see them as very sexual young men. And I think that people standing outside thinking all these poor souls are sort of, you know, in victim status are frankly the ones who are the racists.
Well, those people have got an awful lot to answer for. I mean, whenever the debate is reduced to you're a racist, you know, we know that there's really very little left that they've got to throw. And you're right. I mean, I've always said there's something rather to admire in the enterprise it takes to get from Eritrea all the way to London and beyond. You know, when you actually talk to some of these people and you map, you hear the different number of stages that those journeys involve and the ingenuity to fabricate multiple documents and to blag your way past multiple border controls, you know, as you cross continents. Somehow or other, you've got to feed and water yourself and not become too disgustingly unhygienic. You know, these are not the downtrodden, you know, dregs of society where they come from. These are enterprising, creative, risk-taking, calculating individuals. And in many cases, I'm afraid, they've had to be criminal all the way from their country of origin in order to get to us. You know, at each stage, they have had to break the law. So by the time they get to us, you know, however they've managed to go through all these different phases, they've become quite accustomed to being lawbreakers. That's what it took to get this far.
Yeah. Oh, they've learnt the system. They're tricksy people, that's for sure. Isabel, don't go anywhere because you're coming back after the break and we're going to be drilling down a little bit more detail into Nigel Farage's big Reform UK policy announcement yesterday. Let's try and get some flesh on the bones, and also let's see if we can foretell what the obstacles to success may well be, because like I was saying in my introduction to the show, if you think Brexit was a battle against the establishment, I have a feeling that mass deportations is going to be the battle of the Titans. We'll see you after this.
huge issue. We've got a track record of being able to deliver it, and some people have criticised us saying, oh, you're going to have to do deals with some nasty people around the world. Well, do you know what? Sometimes you do business with people you may not like. If you want peace, if you want a ceasefire in Gaza, you've got to do a deal with Hamas. If you want a ceasefire in Ukraine, you've got to do a deal with Putin. If you want to send people back to Afghanistan, well, you've got to deal with the Taliban.
The Ukraine war's out of our control. How we deal with it, we've got.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the wonderful Isabel Oakeshott as well. You know, during the advert break, I was just thinking, we're talking about the sort of the the sex tourism aspect, let's say, as a motivation for coming over to the West from countries where women are forced to dress like ghosts. And I was thinking to myself, the other thing is, you were talking about these men being very well versed in how to evade law enforcement, very well versed. I mean, I don't know, there's NGOs dotted all over the place, apparently giving them lines, just say this, use this script, claim this, throw your passport in the sea. I'm pretty sure that a lot of these men as well know that if they manage to impregnate a girl who lives in Britain, then that's their passport to stay, isn't it? And I wonder, because the thing is, Nigel's policy, right? I'm all for it. Everyone's all for it. Look at the polling today. This needs to happen. But there are going to be so many little things like this. They will pull out the leftist lawyers, the NGOs, the Lord Hermers of this world. They're all going to be digging around now for any little trick, loophole, barrier, any scheme to derail this. And that's what I want to talk with you about. Because I just have a feeling this is going to be, I mean, Brexit was one heck of a battle. I think this is going to be bigger. I don't know what you think.
Well, I watched Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef unveil the plan yesterday, and I thought, my goodness, prepare for the mother of all battles. If anyone can do it, it's Nigel Farage. There is no politician, I don't think, that bears greater scars on his back from political battles than the leader of Reform UK. And so, if anyone can pull this off, it's him, and they're going to be the team around him. But I think that those of us that are observing from the sidelines, as it were, at this point, and feel very excited by what's being promised and pledged, still have no idea of the scale of the undertaking and the obstacles that are going to be put in the way of this. I mean, for a start, you've got the entire civil service to contend with. And, we know just how difficult it is to get anything through, for example, the Home Office, which is where this policy would presumably be driven from in conjunction with Downing Street and the Cabinet Office. So it is going to be an absolute battle royale. And, I sat there watching Zia Youssef provide the detail. I thought, what? I wonder if anyone can do it. He would be very, very good at pushing that through because it takes somebody who is willing to say and do things that are going to make them, well, frankly, not very popular. But for you and I, we would say not very popular with all the right people.
Exactly. But it's interesting. I mean, I've just scribbled down a few things that I want to pick up on, because I think what was quite promising, I don't know whether they've had some sort of star chamber of barristers working day and night to come up with essentially what to me looks like the blueprints for a great repeal act. So getting rid of the ECHR, getting rid of the Human Rights Act. But of course, that's sort of pulling on a thread, which unfortunately is now interwoven into the tapestry of so much statute in the UK and case precedent. So my wonder is, how long is that going to take? Because I'm pretty sure there will end up being High Court battles to every single element of this. Every single T and I crossed and dotted in that act, or whatever it is, in that legislation, is going to be taken to task by activist lawyers.
100% that is being anticipated, and yes, there are expert lawyers who, as I understand it, who have been providing the highest level advice to Reform's policy-making team. And, this is what happens when you get to a stage where a political party is leading in the polls consistently by a very long way over some period. You get lots of amazingly talented highly skilled professionals volunteering their time and wanting to help a cause. And so, as I understand it, there are a number of very, very skilled people who are lending their expertise to enable the party to anticipate what will come down the tracks if the party is elected, which of course is still a big question mark. And just taking that one step further, on the eve of this big press conference yesterday, so it must have been, I guess, Monday's newspapers, or perhaps it was Tuesday morning, I slightly shuddered to see an article by one Dominic Grieve, a one-time Tory MP and something of a kind of lefty grandee, really. I mean, he was never really a Tory as such. Former Attorney General, who wrote a long piece, I think it was for the Eye or the Independent, just saying, oh, well, none of this is ever going to be possible. You know, in order to do these things, you're going to have to leave this convention and that convention. And, you know, and I just thought, yeah, and
yeah, exactly. Well, let's just leave them then.
What the party is going to do.
I know, but it is all of these things that there's going to be such a noise made on the international stage as well. Oh, Britain is abandoning its human rights. But when I look at what they've done in Germany, for instance, Germany have disapplied the entitlement to have access to a lawyer for people facing deportation. They're in the ECHR. Not only in the ECHR, Germany, by and large, tend to be the sort of member state of the EU who are like, oh, well, the law is the law. You've got to do this. We can't do that. We can't have surveillance on these places where the dinghies are being stored because we were once Nazis. You know, the Germans take this stuff quite seriously, and yet they've gone as far as saying we're not going to give lawyers anymore to people facing deportation. I think it's Denmark who's turned around and said, that's it, we're just not going to take any more asylum claims. So if these countries, liberal, sort of, you know, Scandi-Germanic countries who have always been the sort of vanguards of this stuff are now able to turn around and make these decisions and apply them quite quickly, surely we can.
Well, absolutely. I mean, both Germany and Greece temporarily suspended their adherence to various kind of international protocols in order to stop more asylum seekers coming to their shores. And they did so quite calmly, really. And the last time I checked, Germany, neither Germany nor Greece had become some kind of pariah state. They didn't become regarded as North Korea or Iran. You know, when Australia turned back the boats very effectively, you know, nobody thought Australia had become, I don't know, you know, Sudan or Yemen. It was just still the country we always thought it was and is, which is a very, very civilized place dealing with a national security emergency, which is where the UK is right now. Dealing with a national security emergency. And frankly, I don't much care, and I don't think most of our listeners care, if other countries get on their moral high horse and say, well, what on earth is Britain doing, you know, pulling out of this convention that was actually formulated in the chaos, following the chaos of the Second World War, and is totally unsuited for a modern era of mass migration and instant communication. I don't care if other countries raise their eyebrows or even raise their prices. We got to do what we got to do.
I'm with you all the way. Now, let's take another little break again. But when I come back, I want to look at some of the political reaction to the Reform UK mass deportation policy. And I also want to bring up the subject of Afghanistan. That's after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oi, oi, welcome back. Right, let's remind ourselves of what Nigel Farage said from the DACE yesterday on what reform will do on illegal migration.
But here's what we have to do to make Operation Restoring Justice actually work. We have to leave the ECHR. No ifs, no buts. It may have been a good idea 80 years ago. Frankly, it isn't today. We have to repeal the Human Rights Act of 1998, brought in by a Blair government, many of whose families seem to do rather well off the back of it. We will, for a 5-year period, disapply the 1951 Refugee Convention and any other barriers that can be used by lawyers in this country to prevent deportations, to prevent the right thing from happening. We'll create a legal duty for the Home Secretary to remove those that come illegally. And crucially, we will detain all illegal migrants who come, and we will do so immediately.
Dang, look at his tan. I was just sitting there looking at the screen going, he's been down at sea, hasn't he? He's been on the boat, got a bit of sort of, wind coloration to him. Anyway, let's see how the rest of them reacted. Here's Matthew Pennycook, MP for the Labour Party.
But it's got to be done, as I say, in a planned and managed way, not a chaotic and haphazard way, precisely so we can manage those pressures and ensure that we've got the right amount of accommodation. It's not putting undue pressure on communities. The very worst scenario under unplanned discharge is that we see large numbers of asylum seekers waiting for their claims to be processed, sleeping rough on our streets, putting huge pressure on local councils. And it's for this reason that while I share the frustration of residents in Epping and other communities across the country where hotels are in use, though communities across the country will not benefit from a chaotic discharge as a result of legal rulings such as the interim injunction we've seen, which is precisely why the government is intervening to become a party to that injunction to challenge it.
Mate, has he ever been down Worthy Farm for Glastonbury? Because I swear on my life, about 250,000 people all managed perfectly well in tents. So there's a solution for your sunshine instead of the hotels. Right, and let's listen. This is, to be honest, I think this is comedy skit of the week, this next one. I just couldn't, I almost spat out my brew yesterday when I first heard this clip. Take it away, Kemi.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. The fact is, Nigel Farage is copying our homework. We put out a deportation bill in May. The stuff that actually works and what he said has come from there. But the truth is, he is not doing the thinking, we are. And just like we've seen with the Labour governments who didn't do their thinking in opposition, there'll be a disaster in government, and in particular, a disaster on the economy.
He says he wants to leave the EHCR. You haven't decided that yet.
Well, you will know that in May, we got an eminent KC to review a lot of the treaties which are impacting us, deporting people who should not be in our country. And I have said that we will announce at our conference exactly what we're going to do and how. Saying you're going to leave the ECHR is not a plan. It's going to have a lot of impact on things like the Good Friday Agreement. It's going to impact on so many other laws. How do we make sure that if we have to do this, we do it in a way that doesn't destabilise our country or our economy? Only the Conservatives are working on that sort of plan.
Where do I begin with that? First of all, she's like, saying we're going to leave the ECHR is not a plan. No, Kemi, that's what a plan is. Saying you're going to do something, then you figure out how to execute it. In Kemi's world, a plan is saying we don't know what we're going to do. But then also, this whole idea of, well, they're just copying what we're doing. I know I went to hospital lately, but did I secretly end up in a coma? Have I missed a couple of years or something? Did I get a knock on the head? Were the Conservatives, leaving the ECHR and sending loads of flights out from Stansted Airport to far-flung corners of the world with these people who've broken into our country? Because I must have missed that bit. Isabel, I want to get your reaction to the political reaction to all of this.
It's that bit as well. I sort of didn't know whether to almost feel sorry for her because that was so bad. It was embarrassingly bad. You know, what the heck was that green thing that she was standing next to? I don't know whether you could see it better in the image there. It looked like a kind of giant sideways wheelie bin. It was just the most cringy response to an absolutely barnstorming performance by Nigel Farage today. And I tell you what, you know, the front pages of the papers today across the board, near enough across the board, would have made terrifying reading for the Conservatives, because, you know, there was very, very wholesale coverage of the Farage plan. And I don't think that anybody was saying, oh, look, that looks like it was just cut and pasted from the Conservatives' plan that, by the way, they had 6 years to actually do something and never really actually did anything. And but how many times have you heard Conservative politicians say, well, we might leave the ECHR? I've been hearing that since about, I don't know, 2015, maybe even before that.
I remember it before then. I remember actually when David Cameron was Prime Minister and Theresa May was the Home Secretary, and it was the UK's opportunity as a rotation at being at the top of the European Council. And she was saying then we were going to leave the ECHR and get a British Bill of Rights because of old Hook Hand. That never happened.
Well, there was also a case, wasn't there, about a guy that got, and I remember Theresa May at a Conservative Party conference saying, and I am not making this up, you know, some bloke gets to stay in the UK because of his pet cat. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole kind of scandal, because it turned out it wasn't just because of the pet cat. But anyway, the point was, for the last 10 years or more, the Tories have been banging on about how they might leave the ECHR. Sorry, guys, no one is listening to what you might do anymore. And they're certainly not giving you any credit for saying, well, this was originally our plan that Farage has just stolen. Well, then why didn't you actually do it? You had the power. What?
Exactly. And actually, let's go to this other, I was going to say interesting turn of events. It isn't. The Taliban have just used an opportunity to say they're ready and willing to work with Nigel Farage to accept Afghans who have been deported from the UK. I mean, Germany is sending people back to Afghanistan, it turns out, so they must have had a chat with the tally. And of course, I have a feeling, I predict that this is now going to be the go-to line that the Labour Party is, you, Nigel Farage, who wants to work with the Taliban, you know, that's they're going to go to this all the time, aren't they? But what is quite striking about all of this isn't so much what the Taliban have said, but the fact that in the process of potentially deporting people to Afghanistan, we had that ridiculous situation with the data breach of 27,000 people suddenly on a list with the legal right to be here. We don't know who half of them are, and some of them are bringing 100 family members.
I mean, we didn't have 27,000 people interpreting for us in Afghanistan. You know, I don't know the total number of interpreters that worked for the British Armed Forces, but it was not even a tenth of that, I shouldn't think. So this was just complete lunacy. The whole thing was a complete mess, wasn't it? The handling of that data and the data breach and so on. And I'm sorry, you know, you can't, if you are being given sanctuary, if you're being given refuge in our country, it's a very extreme situation that you're claiming. Nobody needs 20 relatives with them. I mean, you're lucky if you can bring one or two, you know, perhaps a spouse and children. And that's it as far as I'm concerned. You don't get to bring your granny, you don't get to bring your aunties. The case is about you and your immediate next of kin. And I've no idea how we could have gone down the route of allowing people to bring multiples. But, you know, we've done this in the different parts of the immigration system, something I'm always going on about, and I'll keep going on about it because it's absolutely ridiculous. How come students, people who come here, foreign nationals who come here on student visas, are allowed to bring dependents?
It's crazy.
You're a student.
Yeah.
By definition, you're busy studying. So you can't have any dependents. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
And yet it is.
No, I totally agree with you. If someone's coming over to sort of like, break the mysteries of nuclear fission, doing a PhD at Oxford, and they want to bring a bit of family, fine. But you can't just come over and do a Mickey Mouse degree in business studies down the University of Made Up Visas and bring, your nan and your next door neighbour with you. It's mental. Talking about, reaction to what has been, I think, a very successful press conference for Reform UK. I think it's very canny as well to do it during that summer break when everyone's caught napping. Somebody who doesn't seem to be in agreement that this is quite what the UK needs and potentially thinks that they can do one better. Oh, weren't they active on WhatsApp last night, pinging everybody with a phone? Mr. Ben Habib, who seems to have courted the endorsement of Elon Musk. And I thought to myself, I've just got to ask Isabel about that. What do you make of it?
What I make of this, and I'm sure Ben will take this in the spirit that I mean it, because you and I have both worked with Ben in the past, and I fundamentally think that he is a good guy and he means well. But politics is the art of the possible, and I cannot understand why someone so fundamentally intelligent could possibly think at this point that there is space for some random new startup political party, with some whole different set of policies to what is being proposed by Nigel Farage so effectively. The naivety of thinking that at this stage you can start a new political party and somehow be in a position to win seats at the next election on any kind of scale takes my breath away, especially since it comes from a group of people who are actually quite experienced in politics. They should know just how hard it is to get a new political party off the ground, how damn expensive it is, how bleak it is, how you are mocked and ridiculed. And Ben would probably say I'm doing the same now, and I'm not. I mean this respectfully. It is really, really tough to build a new political party. And to get where Reform has now is beyond the wildest dreams of many on the right. So let's go with it. Everybody who shares the agenda should be throwing their weight behind it, rather than fancying themselves as able to start up some whole new little thing, even if they can pull in some supporters in America, whatever. Come on, guys, be realistic. This is going nowhere. Let's get behind Nigel Farage and what he is so brilliantly achieving and where he's got the party in the polls by now, which is just incredible.
Oh, I just wish men, when they had not much to do in their latter years, took up golf like they used to. Why are they all trying to set up political parties? Just stop it. Go back to the allotment, Jezza. Go back to the golf course. Tinker with a motorbike. Have a midlife crisis and wear a leather jacket for all I care. Stop creating political parties. There's too many. Right, let's take another break now. But when we come back, I'm going to talk about, with Isabel, good old Ed Zero, and also the flags adorning our great British countryside. That's after this.
they genuinely believe that all that was needed for the British economy was to kick out the Tories and to put the Labour hierarchy at the top table, and things would suddenly come good. Turns out that's not how things work economically. You actually need to have an economic strategy. There isn't one here. There are just wishes from the Labour
Exactly right. And it turns out as well, the stories in The Sun this morning, unemployment's going to reach highest levels since the COVID pandemic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, OK, welcome back, Isabel. What should we talk about first? Let's talk about Operation Raise the Colours. I love it. I love it because it's playing these leftists at their own game, isn't it? The ones who have sneered at our flag, said that it's way theft, said that it's all about hooliganism, said that it upsets and intimidates people. And as soon as you say, but did you say, no, I think it's wonderful. I've never said that. Oh, I'm a patriot. Of course there's nothing wrong with our national flag. And so now Operation Raise the Colours is sticking it everywhere, as it should be. I love it. And it's just watching them all hand-wring and panic and sweat and obfuscate and come up with excuses why they've got to take them down. And the latest is the Labour-run council in, of course, LGBTQ Brighton, where they sort of had started to take them down, called for their removal, saying on the grounds of compliance with the 1980 Highways Act. Oh, right, yeah. Do the trans flags come under that same Highways Act by any chance, Brighton Council?
Yeah, well, there was a right old drama in Barrow today, because that is a scene of lots of raise the flag action, and there are rows of Union flags being hoisted on lampposts there, and it's all looking great. And there's a real mood to do this in that part of the country. In that particular place in Barrow, there are a lot of migrants and a lot of tension over migrants in the town and the behaviour of those groups. And people were shocked to see what looked like earlier today the police using cherry pickers to go up and try to remove those flags. In fact, luckily, when we looked into this, the police were not doing that. They were erecting, supposedly, some CCTV cameras. But you can see that the mood, is so febrile that any activity is likely to be overinterpreted. And I must say, if I'd seen cops up a lamppost fiddling around a flag, I probably too would have thought that they were up to no good, busy taking it down. But I think we can give them a pass on this occasion. And up and down the country, there are local authorities and other officials just wondering how to handle this, and very, I suppose, conscious that if they get it wrong, it can actually inflame things even further, because our flag should not be at the centre of flag wars. It just shouldn't. It just should be a simple source of national pride. And I think the authorities would do very well to just sort of sit this one out, let people do their thing with the flags, and the whole thing will blow over. If you start tearing them down or making a big plot to try to find some ancient bit of legislation that might allow you to take it down, you're only going to wind people up further.
Oh, no, I love it. I also love the people who have managed to do that famous old thing they do every time it's St. George's Day and point out that St. George was Turkish. Oh, well, it's great. It actually represents diversity. It's like, oh, yeah, right. Go on, then. Now, this is a very unsurprising bit of information, which is we're paying a shed load of money because of Ed Zero's drive to destroying the entire electricity grid through the extra costs of wind farms. But it's not just the cost of paying the wealthy landowners to have these these turbines on their green pastures for a ridiculous amount of money. It's not only the cost of buying them from Uyghur slaves in China, sending a big charity check over to Beijing. No, we got to pay for them to actually be turned off, because the way it all works, energy in the grid kind of needs a stable source of power. So if it gets super windy one day, it's going to blow the whole system up, so you've got to turn it off. And actually, if it's not windy enough and the things are stuck still, you need to have energy running through them so they still turn a bit. I mean, what is the blimmin' point of this stuff is?
Honestly, I think I heard this morning a headline that energy bills are about to go up again. And I just thought, I think whatever it's called is about to increase the price cap. And I just thought, this is insanity. You cannot have an energy poor country becoming a rich country. The two things are contradictory. In order for our economy to boom, we need affordable, or indeed, dare I say it, cheap energy. And we have these resources. We're just, for ideological reasons, being denied access to them, because this lot are absolutely messianic about the net zero agenda. And we're talking less about net zero at the moment because there's so much going on immigration. But the message really is beginning to cut through, I think, to people. For such a long time, it was really difficult to have this debate. All that happened is you got called a climate change denier. That still, of course, is the slur that is aimed at those of us who question this response to changing weather. But nonetheless, ordinary householders are beginning to recognise that it is completely mad that the UK has the highest electricity costs in the world.
Indeed, I couldn't have ended it on a better or more gloomy note myself, an appropriately gloomy note. Isabel, it's been so good catching up with you a whole hour as well. What a treat that was. She is still one of the greatest journalists this country has ever produced. I'll do some of your messages now before we go to advertisements. Aidan says, hi, Alex, I love your accent. Would you know what it is? Because people always get it wrong. People think I'm Welsh, but I'm not. No. If the lefties start hand-wringing about a deal with the Taliban, remind them that Labour gave the provisional IRA pardons despite murdering civilians and security forces personnel. This will be controversial, but we need to look into the Equality Act 2010. Oh, I believe we do. I don't think that's controversial at all. This started out with good intentions, like the ECHR, but it now only picks and chooses when it's applicable and to which group it favours. It's all nonsense. I'm saying it's just criminal law. Don't do bad things to people. These are things you're not allowed to do. Or this, well, that's a woman, that's a gay person. Just forget it. Get rid of it. The lot of it is guff. Paul from Manchester says if Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister in 4 years' time, he has the power to deploy the Navy in the English Channel. Does he, though? I mean, in theory, he does, but someone was telling me that the head of the civil service could drag him off to a police station and bang him up behind bars for making such a command. I don't quite know how things work with prime ministers and executive orders, because we have a very complicated political system indeed. But do tell me more. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because after the break, we're going to be discussing the fact that Elon Musk has promised to fund legal cases against officials who failed over grooming gangs. What sort of charges might they face? That's after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. 1 hour down, 2 to go. Ooh, feel a bit more relaxed today, I must admit. Feel a bit of a strange bump back down to reality after such a long sojourn that I had out in the West Country. I was moving house, you see, and it was a bit stressful. And on top of moving house, which is actually one of the most ghoulish things I've ever done in my life, I'm never doing it again. That's it, I live there forever now. You're just going to find me under the floorboards at some point in about 100 years' time, because that's it, I'm done. Never again. But on top of all that, I decided to go and get blimmin' sick, didn't I? So I've had a bit of a turmoil of late, but here I am, back like a phoenix from the flames. And yesterday I kind of blathering around on air thinking, what are you saying, Alex? What are you even on about? To be honest, I think that way about myself most days. But I feel a little bit more settled in now, a little bit more comfortable, back in the rhythm, you know, sort of, yeah, got the vibes, remember how to do this thing, kind of, always sort of made up as I went along anyway. Right, now, if you go down to X today, you're sure to have a surprise. If you go down to X today, you may not believe your eyes, because after a long period of, I don't know, messing about with spaceships, now that thing's gone in the air, that SpaceX thing, that, what's it called? The Star Cruiser 1000 or whatever it is, that thing that lands itself again that might take people to Mars. Well, that's okay. The cloud has gone. It's in space. So Elon Musk has turned his attention back to what is going on in the UK. You may remember Elon Musk, when he discovered about the Pakistani rape gangs, that was it. He made sure that was firmly back on the agenda. In America, first time they had heard of it, they couldn't quite believe it. But in the UK as well, all the politicians running around going, oh no, it's terrible, oh dear, but we can't have a national inquiry. And then, oh no, we think there should be a national inquiry. Well, he's taken some time out to chuck some kit in the stratosphere, and now he's back on fighting for justice for the victims of grooming gangs, and he wants to go after officials who he alleges are corrupt, who swept this stuff under the carpet and covered up the crimes of the grooming gangs. He said, I'd like to help fund legal actions against corrupt officials who aided and abetted the rape of Britain per the official government inquiry. It came as an unofficial inquiry into grooming gangs led by Rupert Lowe. Claim it had found child sexual exploitation in 85 local authorities across Britain. So what I want to know, what I think we all want to know, is at what point is there the burden of blame here? At what point was it something cultural that people felt too intimidated or bullied in being able to raise these issues, to talk about them, to say, look, I think there's a pattern here. I think there's a certain demographic perpetrating these crimes. At what point did people think, if I do this, I'm going to get into trouble, or the community tensions are going to be stood up? The mad mullahs are going to be here with their Corex boards, you know, calling for jihad if I dare raise this or put it in the public domain. I think it's a very, very difficult one to weigh up, particularly when you're looking at something in retrospect. We are going to be talking to a barrister about some of that detail in a short while. But while we wait to be joined by Sarah, let us do some calls instead, because I'm joined now by Kevin, who's in Leicestershire. Hello there, Kevin.
Wow, the amazing Alex Phillips. Hello, Alex. How are you?
I like that as a little sort of prefix to my name, the amazing. It could be bad amazing, though. It could be like, that is amazingly dreadful.
No, definitely not. You are amazing. I never get to talk to you. You're one of the best. You're brilliant. You really are. You and Kev have had some great banter over the years.
Oh, we do miss our Kev. At least I'm doing him proud.
Yes, you are. You're definitely doing him proud. Yeah, I'll just say this as well. Your emotion the other week with the Bournemouth incident on TV, you know, it shows you really care, and this is why I think you're so popular. You know, you got me that time as well. But I'll move on from that. I really wanted to talk about Nigel's speech, if that's all right.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What are your take-homes?
Well, you're going to have a lot of people criticising, say it's ambitious, but, you know, here's where I stand on it, and this goes out to any leftists, if there's any out there listening to the show, anyone, even human rights lawyers, if anyone's listening. I don't know how they sleep at night, but seriously, we are heading to oblivion, this country, mathematically. You know, whether you're left or right, just do the maths. You know, was it 1,559 come in over the weekend? I think that's 63 million on the taxpayer per year. That's, you know, 41 grand a year per person. I don't pay that much in tax. That's like 4 of me. I'm a HGV driver. That's 4 of me. That's just one illegal migrant every day. And look, I just see people criticising Nigel, and like you said with Isabel, he's going to get a barrage of abuse. The papers will they'll dig up stuff from the past and they'll throw everything at him. But at the end of the day, I know you want to say something. I've got to make this point. If you thinking about voting for Labour, well, this country's gone. The Conservatives put in a super injunction on us. I know they might have had their reasons, but if they can do that, what else can they do? They never delivered anything.
I'm with you. I call it cultural vandalism. I think that's putting it mildly. But a lot of the huge changes that are happening to this country, and not just the economic impact, but the cultural impact, the societal impact, the demographic impact. Unfortunately, these things are essentially irreversible. Unless you want to go like full Tonto and become Idi Amin, which we're not going to do as a country, and I hope and I pray that we never, ever, ever go down such a route. But the big changes that are happening with this level of inward migration, this level of unchecked young men especially coming from hostile countries with terrorist backgrounds, is going to do irreparable damage. There will be blood on the hands of the people who have failed to stop this. This is a national emergency. And mark my words, at some point something is going to happen. Without a doubt, we have brought in terrorists on those boats. Some of those people will be terrorists. Something's going to kick off. And the people who have allowed this to happen should be marched to the International Criminal Court and made to face justice. It's never going to happen, though. Kevin, I'm going to let you go, my darling. It was great to talk to you for the very first time. Thank you so much for your kind words as well. But as we say goodbye to Kevin, I'm pleased to say we can say hello to Sarah Phillimore, who is a barrister who's going to guide us through what Elon Musk might be able to fund, because he has said he wants to throw some cash at legal action against corrupt officials who he claims covered up the crimes of grooming gangs. And what I want to ask you initially, Sarah, is what sort of case could be brought against these people? Sort of professional negligism? Or, I mean, is there any way in which people will be legally held to account?
I'm afraid you optimistically introduced me. I'm afraid I've got no idea what it is he thinks he's going to do. I just briefly looked at the unofficial inquiry. They're talking about 85 local authorities going back to the 1960s. Now, we've got the national inquiry coming finally after Louise Case's recommendations. I don't understand what Elon Musk is trying to do, other than I can appreciate it's a really obvious reaction. This is really distressing what's happened. It's appalling that it has in effect been covered up and people who wanted to talk about it were told they were racists and bigots. But in terms of going after individuals via legal action, I'm just struggling to think what this is supposed to achieve if we're talking about potentially hundreds, thousands of people going back to the 1960s. I mean, clearly what we've got is systems failure. As Louise Casey said, it's about the data. They're still not collecting the data on perpetrators properly. There's still this feeling we mustn't talk about it. It's going to incite all the far-right bigots who will have more riots. But unless we are willing to actually get the data and discuss it dispassionately, this is never going to come anywhere close to being fixed or resolved. Right. And I'm afraid I just don't know what Musk is planning to do. What legal action? Against whom?
I'm afraid you and I have drawn very much the same conclusion then, because the thing is, it's very hard to actually pinpoint or blame an individual for what for a long time has been sort of drilled into the brains of successive generations. I mean, this dates back decades now, the whole idea of, the ever-changing censorship around language, words that are politically correct. Oh, you can't say that anymore. That's not appropriate. You can't use those terms, or you can't say this, or you better not point this out. In fact, it's been so sort of brainwashed into all of us throughout school, university education, and I think particularly in public-facing jobs, where people have to go on various courses for, critical race theory, or try not to be a racist at work.com while you learn how to not break your back sitting in a seat. Then it's really hard to then say to them, well, you were just following this education, this culture that has been drummed into you for years and years and years.
I think that's exactly the point. I think it's really satisfying from a human perspective to have this clear narrative of a villain, a black and white evil villain that we can go after. But this is systems failure. This is, as you say, people working within a system. I don't believe people are evil. I don't believe people deliberately set out to make sure that these girls were abused and no one was taken into account. But you've got people who are apathetic, people who are bored, people who don't have good support around them. They have overwhelming caseloads. And as you say, I think a really big part of it is this feeling that you cannot say things that you know to be true in case you'll be labelled a racist. Now, what Musk did in opening up Twitter was amazing, X as it now is. That's really where he put his financial muscle. And I think that's actually been really helpful, because this is a big part of the problem. There are many others, but the biggest part of the problem, as Louise Casey identified, is the lack of data, the lack of ability to be able to talk about this. And I am sorry to see Musk being led down this road of this really satisfying narrative, let's get the baddies. But 85 local authorities, going back to the 1960s, I mean, who are the baddies? Many of them are going to be dead by now. We need to look at the systems. We need to be able to get the data, to talk about the data without all this nonsense. Oh, you're a racist. It's not helping, is it? Because people are angry. They have a right to be angry. And that anger is coming out in all sorts of really unpleasant and unhelpful ways, because we're not being assisted to talk openly and honestly about the problem. And when the data of perpetrators, the ethnicity was collected, I think Louise Casey found there was a clearly disproportionate number of men from an Asian origin, and we have to be allowed to talk about that.
Well, even, I mean, we're talking about the culture of taboo, and even you, Sarah, just then, maybe completely unwittingly, found yourself doing it by saying men of Asian origin, because we all know it's not men from Cambodia. We know it's not men from Uzbekistan necessarily. We know it's not the Mongolians coming over and doing this. We know precisely who it is doing this, and it might not always be Asian men, but largely the common denominator for these rape gangs, because there have been Somalis and Sudanese scattered around the fringes. The common denominator actually tends to be their faith background. It tends to be that these men are Muslim men, and even now, even you and I are finding it difficult to say this, because you think, can I say that? The Labour Party is going to bring in a definition of Islamophobia. Well, that's me having my collar felt, being dragged down to clink. And this is what I'm saying. It sort of permeates so much that we've almost sort of become inculcated with living with this repression of free speech that's been going on for decades.
No, I think that's a very fair point, because, of course, I am part of that culture. I mean, obviously, I've been fighting on another front in terms of gender. And initially, it was very terrifying to be told, you're a bigot, you're this, you're that, we're going to come for your jobs. And I don't blame people for feeling silenced. I think you're quite right. We need precision in language and data. At the moment, we don't have it, because those facts have been obscured out of what I think Louise Casey quite clearly identified was a fear of being seen as racist. But we have to be able to talk about that. I think it goes back to your earlier points about the problems people feel about mass immigration into this country. If you've got young men from particular patriarchal culture and patriarchal religion being dropped into the middle of England, where everyone's very nice and tolerant, it's clearly going to cause tensions, and we have to be allowed to discuss this, because if we're not, people will vote with their feet and people will vote in a reform government. And I'm not sure that's going to be the best or the wisest thing for this country, but I'm not going to damn people who feel angry enough to do it. because it is getting really concerning that people in position of authority and power are not willing to allow conversations to take place about the actual facts.
But it's worse than that, isn't it? It's not just that they're sort of unwilling to have the conversation, they're actually telling us that we can't have the conversation either, because I find it extremely chilling that they're now grappling around to define the concept of Islamophobia. And what I often say is a phobia is an irrational fear of something. And yet I don't think it's irrational at all for the average Brit to be a little bit worried about widespread Islamism in this country. Because when you look at the empirical data, when you look at the 7/7 bombings, the Ariana Grande concert blown up, when you look at the Southport massacre, when you look at the grooming gang scandals, there is a common denominator here, and we are discerning individuals. We've lived in a country of plenty of other cultures for long enough now to be able to discern that, guess what, the vast majority of people practicing these religions don't mean us harm, and they're not perpetrating acts of harm against us. But we are also intelligent enough to know that there is a pattern here. We are able to address the fact that when there are terrorist attacks, it's not happening at the hand of fundamental Sikhs. It's not happening because the Westboro Baptist Church has decided it's now going to sort of, you know, strap itself with ammo and get on a tube. We can see this. We're not stupid. And yet this government, it seems to me, are going that extra mile at the exact moment we've reached the threshold of saying, OK, let's start having an adults conversation about this, of trying to do everything they can to stop it. And that terrifies me.
I think you're right to be terrified. I mean, I can understand the reluctance because, of course, there are real racists, there are real phobics who wish to do harm to perfectly innocent, law-abiding people. But the fear of that minority, I think you're right, has corrupted a wider and necessary debate about what we know to be true. The leaders of some Islamic countries explicitly express their disdain for the West and their wish to destroy Western societies. It is madness to suppose that we can live alongside in peace and tolerance with those who are committed to ending our way of life. And as women, we feel that quite fiercely. Look at what's happening in Afghanistan. I don't want to see anything like that being encouraged or tolerated here. There has to be a limit to our tolerance. I think you are right to be worried. I can understand to a degree why they want to put the lid on some aspects of this debate, because there are some very dangerous, unpleasant people out there who are genuinely racist and violent. But we can see the pendulum has swung, I think, far too far. The unintended consequences of trying to stifle that really nasty minority is, I think, a growing sense of rage and fear amongst a much more respectable majority who, like you say, just want to be able to have conversations about things that are real and things that matter. And I'm really worried it seems to be happening over a lot of really important topics in our society. There's a general breakdown of trust, isn't there? People feeling that politicians will be honest, will be open, that we can actually have conversations and reach a resolution. It's a dangerous time. And I appreciate they've tried to do this for noble motives, but I think the consequences are going to get worse. We can't lock up everybody who makes a stupid tweet as a policy of deterrence. That isn't going to work because the grumbling discontent is growing and growing. So what I hope is that there is going to be more of an appetite for just open and honest discussions and not shutting down things that you find distasteful on the basis of bigotry, phobia, far right, this or that. It isn't bigoted, phobic or far right to be, as you say, concerned about the impact on a community of allowing others to live there who do not share the fundamental values of the host community. It seems to me pretty obvious.
I would argue it's as hardwired into us biologically, psychologically as human beings. Sarah Phillimore, brilliant barrister, giving us the lowdown there. Thank you ever so much. Now, you know all these people who go out and, you know, glue themselves to concrete, chuck orange paint on stuff in art galleries, who proselytise in the columns of The Guardian about how British values of tolerance. I mean, it really stuck in my craw the other day when I was watching the Nigel Farage Reform UK press conference. And I watched the press conference and I was sitting making little notes to myself thinking, oh, I need to find out about this. I really want to know if this is going to be applied retrospectively. I want to know actually if they will disapply the legislation in this particular area. How are they going to afford that? How long is it going to take to build all these detention centres? That's how a little journalist brain works, right? That's how it's supposed to work. So it gets to the press pack afterwards, all answering their questions. And it was like that scene from the end of Spartacus, right? Instead of them all standing up going, I'm Spartacus, they may as well have stood up and gone, I'm Woketicus. Because one journalist goes, oh, but Mr. Farage, what if someone that you deport ends up facing torture back at home? How will you live with yourself? And I was like, well, how about someone who hasn't been deported who's raped a kid? What about that? Huh? Did that not occur to you? Do you not have empathy with your own people? Anyway, not just one asked this question. They all blimmin' well did. It was like everyone asked the same question. I'm like, he's answered it already. You're a journalist. Move on to the next topic. You've taken down your notes of what he said in response to that. Now actually drill down into the detail as you're supposed to. But then I realised that these people, it's just a performative art to them. There's this small subset of society who unfortunately are the most influential. They tend to be the people at the moment sitting on our front benches, the people presiding over decisions in courts, and people largely peppered throughout the legacy media. And this tiny subset of people who seem to completely sociopathically fail to have any empathy with their own kind, always seem to side with the perpetrators, not the victims, and shower themselves in this faux moral rectitude. In doing so, look at me. I'm not at the sharp end of this decision-making. Oh, in my leafy suburb, my next-door neighbour. Oh, he's from Iran, but he studied at Cambridge University and he's now a brain surgeon. Well, great, because you go to a poor part of town and the next-door neighbour who's from Iran is in a house of multiple occupancy who's paid a people trafficker and is selling drugs at the corner of the street. It's used as this luxury ideology to bequeath themselves with some higher form of social standing and status so they can look down on the riffraff and say, I'm not so ignorant as to hold those views as those great, unwashed, nasty far-right racists. So I did some digging into this. And I've actually found out that someone else has done some digging into this. And it turns out that leftists are narcissists. We're going to be speaking to a narcissism expert after this.
I think they genuinely believe that all that was needed for the British economy was to kick out the Tories and to put the Labour hierarchy at the top table, and things would suddenly come good. Turns out that's not how things work economically. You actually need to have an economic strategy. There isn't one here. There are just wishes from the Labour
Exactly right. And it turns out as well, stories in the Sun this morning, unemployment's going to reach highest levels since the COVID pandemic.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, there you go. Before the break, I was telling you about a little article that I wrote when I came into work today, and Samara's put together the show with all the news from around the country. She snuck in one of my own pieces. I'm like, oh, look at that. Yeah, way to go. Way to advertise your hustle. So I wrote an article on my Substack the other day, yesterday in fact, about a fantastic piece of research that's been conducted by two professors at Bern University, Anne Crispins and Alex Bertrams. And what's staggering, right, is they said that for ages the only interest has been about the far right, all been about the fascists and what psychologically drives them, although I always say actually the Nazis were kind of left-wing, by the way. Just, you know, massive racist along with it, massive, oh yeah, I forgot that. Most left-wing people are a little bit anti-Semitic, aren't they? But all the research has been allegedly done into the far right. No one's actually looked at the psychology of the left until they decided they wanted to do this. And so they conducted a study with 391 recruits with average age of 46 years who completed various online assessments. And they found out that leftists tend to possess very high levels of neurotic narcissism. They care strongly about what others thought of them and had a very strong drive for admiration. And yet, one thing they didn't find any evidence of, right, is any relationship between leftism and altruism, i.e. actually wanting to do good. And so that these people with these dark personality traits like narcissism and psychopathy who are drawn to these ideologies, their motivation is not driven by a genuine desire for social justice and equality. Oh no, they use these ideologies to sate their own egoistic needs. They pretend to be pro-social, but instead narcissists have very low empathy for others and are motivated by self-centered desires. Let's speak now to a man who knows a thing or two about narcissism, because he is one. No, I'm sure he's not. He's a narcissism expert. This is Richard Grannon. Thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. Without a doubt, the first trick to knowing that you're not a narcissist is worrying that you might be a narcissist. That's what someone told me once upon a time. But it's fascinating. I've thought for a long time, you know, ever since there's been this concept of luxury ideologies, you know, the latest Gucci handbag is saying, my kid's trans, that so much of these people who bang on about, you know, refugees welcome, don't actually care about the refugees. They just want to look good on social media.
Yes, and that's what the Crispins and Bertram's research indicated, isn't it? Is that actually they're finding that a lot of these people who claim to be left-wing are actually authoritarian more than pro-social left-wingers. They're not fighting for the working class. They're not interested in workers' rights. They're interested in performative displays of dominance and power. It correlates very highly, according to their research, with antagonistic narcissism as well as neurotic narcissism. So neurotic narcissism is what we would usually think of as fragile, highly self-victimizing, highly vulnerable narcissism. And then you have the antagonistic, which is more entitled, aggressive, and confrontational. And what they were suggesting is that a lot of people are simply using left-wing ideology as a front. They're riding it like a vehicle to fulfill their own ego needs. And those ego needs turn out to be quite nasty.
It doesn't surprise me, therefore, that we find among professions such as politics and journalism, where I think, you know, a self-aggrandizing narcissist might be drawn towards those very public exhibitions of power and influence. It doesn't surprise me whatsoever when you find these sorts of ideologies, this sort of trendy leftism, so popular within that cohort. Do you think that that is a fair assessment to make?
I think so, yeah, because as you alluded to before, and as you alluded to in your very well-written article, you referenced Gadsard's notion of suicidal empathy, and he also posited something called epistemological dichotomania, which is where everything is split into two opposing groups, which is a very infantile way of viewing the world. These are people who do not trade in nuance. They split the world up in this infantile way, good and bad, and then they imbue everything with this suicidal empathy. And a lot of it seems to be for the reaction they can get from others and in order to climb dominance hierarchies. Now, when I was a kid growing up in the 80s, that wasn't what left-wing was about. It was about justice. It was about workers' rights. That's why Labour is called Labour. These people are not interested in that at all. They're only interested in those groups that are foreign or exotic or from far away. They're not interested in their own people. They're not interested in the indigenous population of their own country at all. In fact, and the research backs this, they're very aggressive towards people. And one of the things that they found in their study is that a lot of this is actually just anti-hierarchical aggression that's playing out.
Yeah, it's interesting because where you've seen the polls change sort of politically, where the working classes are now on the right and the elite are on the left, I wonder how much this has got to do with the sort of prevalence of these luxury ideologies. And a theory that I've read before is this idea that once upon a time you were able to show off to everybody that you were wealthy because you had a smartphone, or you had a brand new car, or you had a subscription to Sky TV. Whereas now, in the world that we live in, with so many finance deals available and the progress of technology, is most people, whatever their strata in life in terms of their earnings, probably have a smartphone. Most people probably have a number of television channels they can watch. Most people now can get on a flight and go get a suntan, whether it be to Benidorm or Bermuda. Most people now don't have a sort of clap-type Peugeot 205 they've kept on life support down the local mechanics for the last 20 years. They probably have a relatively new addition to their car. And on top of all of this, most people, even if they don't have those things, can use filters and selective editing on social media to curate this idea that they do. And so instead, it seems to me that the only way these days you can demonstrate that you are of the elite is to actually very openly and very sort of exhibition, in a very exhibitive way, show people that you believe in these niche causes, because you know by and large that you're probably somewhat insulated from them, that the migrant hotel isn't going to be at the end of your street, that if your little child suddenly declares it wants to be trans, you can afford all the care in the world to help them. And so all the things that they tend to espouse, which largely go against the interest of other people, they themselves are never on the sharp end of receiving.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it as being an aspect of affluenza, but the way that you framed it there, that makes sense. So if I'm raised in a very privileged environment, and most of the people who espouse these beliefs are clearly very, very privileged, because as you say, they're luxury beliefs. They can afford to have the belief and signal the belief without bearing the consequence of the effects of that belief being enacted. And so, yes, maybe this is the new handbag. Maybe this is just a status hierarchy flex to get you somewhere into the oppression Olympics at some level, even if you're just on the sidelines cheering it on. And that does seem to be a class issue rather than a national or an ethnic issue in this case. I need to think about it more, but the affluenza angle of this is interesting.
Yeah, no, it is, isn't it? Because it's definitely something that's happened politically. Like you said, the Labour Party don't like the working class. They actually enjoy grimacing at the working class. And if they don't grimace at the working class, instead they sort of selectively fetishise the working class, which is why they so like Angela Rayner, because it's, oh, there's Ange, you know, have a vape and a big glass of wine on the beach.
But she's only a token, isn't she? She's only a token. And I think the fact that she's a token just reinforces your point that they actually loathe working class people. I mean, I don't know about the Labour Party in general, but I can say with absolute certainty that Keir Starmer loathes, fears, despises the white working class of the UK, and all of his decisions have demonstrated that time and again. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, he didn't at all. It was you've thrown a very great, but it's true, isn't it? Something very strange has happened to this country. I get into trouble a lot because I moan about the middle classes, of which I am one. Let's be fair. But I've noticed more than ever there used to be. I don't know if maybe I'm just sort of looking back at some history that never existed. But I felt that there's now more of a class divide. There's more sneering. There's more snobbery than there ever has been. Maybe it's just when I grew up, I wasn't aware of it so much, but today I just feel as if there's a real battle now. And the fascinating Professor David Betts, who talks about the risk of there potentially being a civil war in the future in the United Kingdom, suggests that this could actually essentially happen between, the urban areas and the countryside, or essentially the working classes and the sort of privileged few. And I want to know what you think about that.
Yes, you're right. It is acceptable, and it has become more commonplace to act like a snob and to sneer, but only if it's done to lower class white people. You can't do it to people who are not from here. That's not acceptable. But really, there's nothing you're not allowed to do to working class white people now. In the culture we have in the UK, they're just trash. You can insult them, you can treat them with contempt, you can exploit them, you can outcast them, you can treat them with derision. There's no consequence whatsoever to that. I'm with you. I'm more middle class, so these are my people, and I do see that sort of the similar two things that you've pointed out is definitely happening. One, there's more sort of higher status hierarchy flexing to try and get into the oppression Olympics. These are my luxury beliefs. And at the same time, concurrent with that, a growing disdain for white working class people, which is odd because they form the majority of our country. So we're back to suicidal empathy again. This is a kind of, I don't know where these people think this ideology is going to go. Wars, civil wars. You mentioned the professor. Civil wars and wars are fought by working class men.
Yeah.
The majority of the working class men in the United Kingdom are white. It might not be very intelligent to treat them with contempt so consistently and so openly.
Do you know, it's interesting as well, I've come up with another theory and from the sort of, Alex University of Nothing, which is one thing about the working classes is because they can't afford nannies, because they can't afford cleaners, because they can't afford to just take their car to the garage to get an annual service, they have to work together. They have to help each other out. Oh, I can help fix your car. Oh, I'll lend you my drill. I'll help you put up that shelf. Oh, don't worry, you drop off little Bobby at my front door because you've got to work late this evening. They come together and pull together as a community because they need to. If they didn't do that, they'd be up the proverbial. But also, because they don't have a lot, their want for a lot is a lot less. To me, the working classes seem to be people who are just happier in their own skin and happier with one another because they get so much succor and delight from just being in each other's company. And I think as a result, they tend to be, the people most grounded in reality because they don't live as some sort of sheltered existence where, the true cost of things doesn't seem to have any sort of impact on their lives whatsoever. But they also tend to just be more socialised. They go out in and out of each other's houses. They're more generous. They give things to other people. They're more tolerant. It actually seems to me the sort of privileged middle classes, for all of their look at me, I'm wonderful, I care about the Syrian refugees, who are actually the pretty nasty, unsocialised, judgmental yobs.
Yes, they are spiteful, and they're described as by some of my friends very, very spiteful. It's interesting what you say. So yes, if the economic context in which you live forces you to have more of a community focus because you're more dependent on people, that would reduce your latent narcissism and increase your humility because you're asking for favors and you're giving favors as well, which feeds a basic human need. So therefore, people in those environments are actually living in more of an evolutionary match to what we as human beings are adapted to, which is living in tribes. Whereas the wealthy people are, you're right, they're becoming more and more alienated. And there's an effect in animals when they're kept in cages. I think it's called zoomania. So when animals are kept in an unnatural environment for a very, very long time, they develop these strange tics. They'll start plucking at their own feathers or tearing at their own skin or jumping up and down in repeated motions. And you're right, maybe this is something to do with the alienation of their affluence affords middle class and upper class people, is it's actually made them very, very mentally ill. And that's why they're doing this, is because they've gone mad.
That's what I think. I think that's
Our
absolutely
elites
true.
have gone mad.
They're self-indulgent. They don't have any purpose. If you worry about how you're going to pay your electricity bill and if you can afford to go on holiday this year, you don't have enough time to worry what sort of acronym for mental condition you've got and how much, how many therapists you need to see. Pure self-indulgence. I think you're right. Zoomania. Yeah. Do you know, I could talk to you all day. Absolutely fascinating. I'm now going to have to follow this up and do another piece, and I'm especially going to have to use the word epistemological dichotomania because I adored that. Fantastic song to you. Let's do this again. I think that's the sort of conversation you don't really get very often on the good old radio there. Now, if you wanted to read my article on this, which is where it all began, I'm going to do a little bit of a I don't know what that was. That's the promo noise, self-promotion noise, narcissism alarm. You can actually subscribe to my Substack. It is That's What She Said at thatalexwoman.com. So there you go. Go and knock yourself out. There's gazillions of articles and interviews on there, and I've had a bit of a time off from it lately because I wasn't well and I was moving house. But I'm about to start pumping out exclusive content like the Factory of Facts. So there you go. You can be part of my little personal community should you wish. If you're not bored to death of me on the radio, you can go and read the stuff I write as well. Thatalexwoman.com. Okay, right, going to take a short break. When I come back, it's time for some calls.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, let's do some messages and calls. I ran that segment a bit long. I'm a bit behind schedule, aren't I, Samara? Oh, well, I know. You didn't shout at me in my ear, though. You were enjoying that interview too much, weren't you? Everyone was, apparently. Fascinating chat, fascinating guest. That expert is incredible. Someone else said, best part of Talk all day. Maybe that's what we should do. We can make it like the Fraser Crane show. You can be my Roz. I love that programme. Best comedy ever written. Doctors Jack and Jean Block studied school bullies in 1989, and the vast majority grew up to be lefties. I drink at the Jolly Heretic, says Carl in York. No, it's true. I always say most people who end up being politicians are people who are picked on at school, which is why they want to then exact their revenge. You were bang on with the snobbery, Alex. My daughter doesn't acknowledge me because she went to uni and she lives with her dad in a better area and housing estate. Yet I don't have anything on tick and own 2 houses. But I drink, smoke and swear, so I'm classed as scum. You sound like my kind of gal, Debs. Let's go down the spoons and, just say as many profanities as we can in under a minute, because I have to store them up. If I do them on air, I get in trouble with Ofcom. Right, okay, let's speak now to Mark, who's in Lincolnshire. Hi there, Mark.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. How are you?
You're sounding chipper tonight anyway. Yeah, not too bad myself. Yeah, a few things. Right, so many things to talk about, always is. Yeah, I'm not in the Farage camp. And the thing I really want to run by you, because it's kind of thing that you always come across as being a little bit interested in, and that is, I mean, obviously we know that the children coming from Gaza for medical treatment. Now, that's all well and good, but we all know, I think at least we all should know, that the chances are they're going to end up as asylum seekers. But the one that really worries me, that I'm interested in your opinion on, Alex, is this new plan. That's not a plan, they've done it anyway, where they're allowing Gazans to basically get study visas so they can come and study here. This I find incredibly dangerous, because you're talking about people, these are going to be young adults that have just come through a education system where they've basically been completely indoctrinated into hate for Jews, Christians, everybody in between, and worse than that, probably, killing, the death to Jews and death to Christians, death to everybody that's basically not them. And we're letting them come here to study. I mean, now, obviously, these people will probably, let's be honest, again, why would you want to go back to Gaza? They'll claim asylum. We all know that. If you don't think that, you're an idiot, as far as I'm concerned.
It's a really difficult one here, right? And I'll tell you for why. There are plenty of people in Gaza, and we've seen the footage after the disgusting October the 7th massacre of ordinary citizens when those girls and those hostages were dragged back over the border, blooded, bleeding, injured, degraded, carted around the town. Oh, they're loving it, weren't they? Clapping, wanting to touch, cheering, raising the flag. If it could have been projected on a big screen, they'd have been there, eating their whatever it is and enjoying themselves and having a big street party. Absolutely. They loved it. So we know that there are plenty of people who live in Gaza, and we've seen footage as well of young kids and the sort of things that even the UNRWA-sponsored textbooks are saying about killing Jews and so on and so forth. We've seen videos of little kids being made to hold AK-47s wearing keffiyehs pointing at the sky. So we do know that there are plenty of people in Gaza who have deep-held sympathies with Hamas. Yet, we also know there are plenty of people who might have been forced to vote Hamas or have their head chopped off, or plenty of people who despise the tyranny of those Islamists. Because also, and this is an interesting thing, there are plenty of people in Gaza who are Christians as well. And the difficulty is, I agree, if you're going to suddenly say to anyone from any war zone, particularly when that war zone is beholden to some pretty extreme anti-Western ideology, so whether we're talking about Syria, whether we're talking about Afghanistan, etc. It's very difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff, to know whether you're getting the terrorist or terrorist sympathiser, or those people who, like you, hate that and are trying to escape it. I mean, what sort of test can you do? Well, dig down into everyone's social media footprint for the entirety of their life, get inside their brains, make them do a lie detector test. So I'm with, kids being brought over for medical treatment is very hard morally to argue against an innocent, a minor, coming to get life-saving and life-changing medical care. And yet the likelihood is these people will then be granted asylum with their families. How do we know what the attitudes of their families are? I mean, if I was in charge, and I'm just thinking off the hoof here, you have to excuse me here, Mark, I think what I would do probably is go to Israel and say, you've got Mossad, they're probably the best intelligence agency on planet Earth. How do you do this stuff? Because if anybody knows how to vet people coming over from the Gaza Strip, it's Israel. Because, of course, before October the 7th, there was a border and there were people who lived in Gaza who were going to work in Israel. They've had plenty of prisoners from the Gaza Strip, who many of them have been released, actually. Israel knows what's what when it comes to surveying that population, knowing who's the goodie and who's the baddie. So I'd probably be checking in with them. And it's also important to note that for a very long time now, Israel has been offering medical care to children in the Gaza Strip. I would far rather create resources and facilities in neighbouring countries where they have beautiful, big, shiny modern hospitals in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan. I would far rather say to them, let's make sure that you have the capacity to treat these people not far away from their own home, because I think the security risk potentially outweighs the altruism of looking after these people. But at the same time, little kids needing medical care, growing up in a war zone, it's very hard, isn't it, to argue against that. So there you go. That was my potted thinking. I'm going to say goodbye to you now, Mark. Thank you for calling me, because I've got to take another short break. Because when we come back, I want to discuss Lord Hermer, one of my least favourite people in Britain. He's just got a new member of staff who might be just as radical as he is. We're discussing that after this break.
Nigel Farage only a few months ago was saying tow the boats back to France. He's realised you can't do that because he hadn't thought through the plans. What Kemi Badenoch has said, she wants to think through his plans properly. She's got Lord Wolfson, who's one of the most eminent lawyers in the country, looking at the implications of leaving the ECHR. Nigel Farage has shifted from where he was before. We'll just tow the boats back to France. We told him that wouldn't work. He then adopted pretty much our entire policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Can I say you guys absolutely love good old Richard Grannon, our narcissism expert. It's like you all feel vindicated that for so long you've been saying, I thought there weren't people mentally ill, now I know it's true. We all knew, didn't we? I really enjoyed that. Well done, Samara, for finding. He was absolutely, great conversation. We don't have enough conversations like that on air, do we? So thank you for all of your messages. And Samara, please make sure that Richard knows how adored he's been by our audience. And let's get him back on and do a bit of a psychologising over the nation again. We all love that, didn't we? Oh yeah, I always say it's communal catharsis. Let's just roll out the old therapist's couch, shall we? Anyway, thank you for your messages indeed. Let's speak now to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, former Director General, no less, Ministry of Defence. I want to speak to you about good old Lord Herman. Now, normally I'm sort of picking your brains about geopolitics and various theatres of war, but I'm pretty much now Britain's become a theatre of war. And it seems to me that someone behind a lot of decisions that are made against the national interest. And I think of the sort of the rap sheet of everybody that he's defended, all the terrorists that he's prevented being deported, all of the extremist organisations he says were allowed to perpetrate their acts causing disruption because in their hearts they were doing it for the greater good, and of course giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. There seems to be one common denominator: the Attorney General. And I bring him up today because he's just got a new spad who turns out to be equally an EU fanatic with eco-crazed sympathies. How risky is this? Because previously the Attorney General has been picked out of somebody who's elected to Parliament. I think this might be the first Attorney General we've had that Keir Starmer's basically just gone and got his Marxist mate from his barrister's chambers. And this guy, normally an Attorney General, is told, right, this is what we're going to do, make this legally work. I get the impression that the power dynamic in this relationship is kind of the other way around, that he's the one calling the shots. And I don't think those shots are necessarily very sensible. How risky is it to have this guy? How accountable is he?
Well, Alex, I'm not a fan. He started off his tenure by calling people like you and me Nazis and fascists, which from an Attorney General would suggest that his impartiality guidelines need to be revised. We have to accept, I think, that when you have a 165-seat majority in the House of Commons, it's the nearest thing you get to a dictatorship in a democracy. And I'm afraid to say that the old sort of left and right markers are not really in place anymore. What we have in this country right now is a polarization between what I would call nationalists, those who actually like this country and its culture, and internationalists whose vanity and also sort of personal preferences are for international agreements, institutions, and frankly, not British interests. And I'm afraid to say you've got this chap, he's on the extreme side of international institutions and the rights of foreigners over and above British people. And everything he does and everything he says seems to indicate that that's the case. And as I said, if you've got this huge majority in the Commons, you're going to be able to spawn lots of extremists. And we shouldn't forget that most of the government, of course, were prepared to be Jeremy Corbyn's cabinet. So we shouldn't be surprised. And frankly, we're going to have to accept that we're going to see a lot more of these sorts of appointments like this SPAD. and also recognise that within government we've got a lot of extremists who are not working necessarily in Britain's interest.
I mean, it's a lot of, not a lot of people listening because they all agree with you, they're cheering you along, but a lot of people, you said that in the wider world, if I went onto Newsnight, which I sometimes do, and said, well, basically the government is chock full of people who are dangerous extremists, they would think I had gone tonto, they'd think I'd gone loopy. You can't say, it'd be a very controversial thing to say. And yet I'm minded to fundamentally agree with you. The fact that we now have, as a sort of a rich seam running through the politics of this country, radical leftism, which as far as I'm concerned, during the Cold War, we spent about 3 decades trying to fight that stuff. We've just elected it. I often mention the fact that Sir Keir Starmer seemed to go and do his gap year in a socialist workers' camp the other side of the Iron Curtain. I'm like, that's a bit funny, isn't it? How perilous a position are we in as a society?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm not really worried about people's politics. I'm worried about their competence, to tell you the truth. And frankly, if you are a rich country, you can afford all this vanity and virtue signalling and things like that. When you haven't got any money, you can't. It's absolutely disastrous. And this government has brought us to the edge of default and bankruptcy, frankly, and we're going to see a huge financial crisis coming up in future. Said, you could go on Newsnight. Well, I'm afraid the BBC's full of extremists as well. So I'm afraid until we actually weed out from our establishment, the civil service, our politics and also our institutions, this extremist element, which relies on either common purpose, if you believe in that, or critical social justice, which is frankly the posh word for woke, not going to get anywhere. And the interests of the British people are not going to be upheld by people whose vanity, I'm afraid, and ideological preferences make them feel psychologically comfortable.
I couldn't agree more. And there we were, just talking about luxury ideologies and narcissism, exactly as you're describing there. Brilliant to have you on, Chris. Let's catch up again soon. It's about time we did a geopolitics slot in some days forward, because I haven't done that for a while, have I? OK, right, going to take a little advert break now, but I'm still with you for another hour. Go pour yourself a G&T.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
welcome back to the show. 2 hours has gone by really quickly, hasn't it? Well, it has for me. I've really enjoyed myself today. I've had some fascinating conversation. I'll tell you what, that Samara is an amazing producer, and what's more, she's also an amazing woman. She's also really hot. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. I'm going to get in trouble with HR. I'm a straight woman, by the way. I'm cis. But she's blooming beautiful. She's a picture. And if you've not seen her before, then you're in for a treat, because I think it's Friday, Samara, you're covering Kev. You're doing this slot on Friday, because I'm back to my normal 10 till 1. So Samara's going to be in the hot seat doing this job from 7 till 10. I'm just a bit worried that she's so good, everyone's going to be taken off air, and it's just going to be Samara from morning till night. And do you know what? I'd watch that stuff. I'd watch it, because she's absolutely brilliant. And like I said, it's like for sore eyes as well, that one. Sometimes I just come in and I look at her and I wish I didn't own mirrors to realise what my own face is like compared to hers. But there you go. Let's just call her Helena of Troy. Let's do some of your messages before we crack back into the programme. Here's one. Becca in Norfolk says, after my divorce, the family court requested a psychological test on my ex-husband. He came out as a grandiose narcissist. 7 years of hell from him. I bet that doesn't sound like fun. I feel now this is the next word to be thrown around. It will soon mean nothing, and anyone living with these evil people will suffer. I wanted to read that out because I think you're right, Becca. Now we have so much pathologising. I've got OCD. I've got ADHD. He's got narcissistic traits. I mean, can we all stop having mental health conditions? Because some people actually do, and that's quite a serious thing. And I hate it when people are banging on and on and on about things like, oh, you're this and you're that and you're... No. Get a clinical diagnosis first. But there is, in terms of narcissism as a sort of catch-all theory, as opposed to being a grandiose narcissist, this research does show, the research that we were just talking about in the last hour of the show, does show a direct correlation between neurotic narcissism, self-aggrandizement, and people who have extremely leftist views. The woke, basically. The woke are just all up themselves, if I was going to sort of, you know, put it crudely. And if you want to go and read that article, self-promotion alarm, you can find it on my Substack, thatalexwoman.com, and the Substack itself is called That's What She Said, and there's loads of articles and interviews I've done on there, and I pump out content relatively regularly. So if you want to join the community, you can either join it for free or you can become a paid-for subscriber for extra stuff. But it'd be great to have you on board, because I really like writing. I know my mouth motors away at 15 to the dozen, but my true love, as you can tell by my sort of verbiose vernacular, is actually sitting there with my quill and scribing something. So if you'd like to read some of the stuff I'm churning out, then that is where to find it. That's alexwoman.com. Martin in Aberdeenshire says he loved the discussion about affluenza. May I suggest the answer is compulsory purchase of property in the leadership class home area, install homes of multiple occupancy in their back gardens. Problem solved. Yeah, no, I think it's my mum who came up with the idea that MP's second home should be turned into houses of multiple occupancy, and they should be all put down that Britannia in Canary Wharf. I'm like, exactly. That's these people who sort of espouse these sort of anti-nationalistic views, things that are against the interests of the ordinary person, are often shielded from the impact of them. Deb says, thanks, Alex. You've given me something to shout back at the lefties at Saturday's protest when they shout Nazi at us. It gives me 2 days to think of a rhyming song to go with narcissism. I don't think anything rhymes with narcissism. I mean, you probably have to, you know, really dig down deep in the thesaurus to find out. Ian says, why do so many celebs have massive showy weddings only to split up shortly after? Because they're narcissists. No, they're just people who just... Big difference as well between a show-off and a narcissist. One's a sort of diagnosable condition, and then the other one is just being a big head. Right, OK, now we've dealt with all of that. So keep your messages coming in, by the way. And also, if you want to register your interest to call and join the conversation, now is a perfect time to do it. Faith, I can see her back of her head there, the lovely Faith. She's waiting to pick up the blower. And make sure that you're not too unhinged. 03444991000, because we're going to be, after we've spoken to my next guest, taking lots and lots of calls to get us all the way through till 10 o'clock. So register your interest right now. And then when the time is nigh, Faith will give you a call back, 03444991000. It's your normal network rate. You can also keep the WhatsApps coming in on that particular number, and if you want to text me, it's 87222. Right, talk before you text. Okay, I've got a brilliant guy lined up for you now. He's a firm favourite here in Talk Towers because he just speaks so much sense. My mum also loves him. My mum's discovered X in recent years, and I think she only follows a few people, and James Melville is definitely one of them. And you know, if it's a favourite of Leslie Phillips, that is the highest accolade you can get, James. Welcome aboard.
No, I mean, what an intro. I mean, shall we just end this now? I mean, I think my work's done. I mean, I've got the support of your mother.
I know,
Job
basically, it's a race between you and Rakib Ehsan because she loves Rakib as well. So I don't know who's in pole position at the moment, but if you give a Sterling turn right now, then maybe you might just pip Rakib. Let's talk, first of all, about what I've got in here to talk to you about. We're going to spend some time on this, and I just want to sort of have a wander through all sorts of topics. It's the idea that kids as young as 10 are being given weight loss jabs. At least 188 severely obese youngsters are being prescribed Wegovy at specialist NHS weight clinics. That's according to data from 13 health trusts. And yet at the same time, we found that food prices have gone up by 37%. It isn't unsurprising, actually, given the instability in Ukraine. The cost of oils went up, and wheat and fertiliser. Also, when energy prices are so high, refrigerating, transporting food, all the rest of it. Of course, all the people in the Remain camp are going, it's because of Brexit. No, it's not. But it's an interesting phenomenon, isn't it, that we now have more obese kids than ever before that are actually getting jabbed, and I wonder if you think that's a good idea. And yet, at the same time, nosh costs so much. Is there a correlation?
Yeah, I think there is. In terms, first bit in terms of the cost of living crisis and the escalating food inflation. I mean, this is something that's really been going on. I think people have noticed it since COVID. You know, some connections there in terms of disruption of supply chains. There's also the money printing that devalues the currency, but it's also, quite frankly, corporate greed, supermarket greed. I mean, Tesco's, for instance, in the last year they were showing profits of operating profits of over 3 billion. And yet, when you get sort of itemized bits of food, you know, we're all experiencing it. You go in, you get some butter, it's increased by 50p, you get some olive oil, you know, some reasonable standard olive oil, suddenly north of £15. And you can multiply that on item after item and item. And the connection going into, therefore, health and lifestyle is that when it gets too expensive on some basic essentials, whether it's heating or eating, people start cutting. And in the case of food, they start cutting out the healthy stuff and they start going for cheap, fixed junk food. And that is obviously not good for their own health, and it leads to obesity as well. Now, the second point in terms of, you know, the obesity figures in this country are off the scale. One of the worst in Europe. Same with child obesity, and also ultra-processed foods. In terms of total budget spend of food in the UK, more than 50% of it is spent on ultra-processed foods. That is significantly higher than any other country in Europe. So we've got a number of things I think we need to discuss within sort of the food debate and the fitness debate. The other aspect of that is farming. Now, I've seen one or two comments saying the price of food is going up because the farmers are putting the price up. That's utter tosh, because the farmers are getting pittance from the supermarkets. And the consumers on the other side are getting ripped off. But ultimately, it's about corporate greed. And the problem with that is people start making some pretty savage choices about what food they're buying, and they sort of almost dial back towards more unhealthy food.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because farmers might say, like you said, they're getting less money than ever before for meat. And I wonder, right, that one of the things we're massively lacking, and I think, you know, I think you, like me, a good friend of Asim Malhotra, who has campaigned a long time against the sort of psychopathic evil of the big food industry. People think when they go and buy food off a supermarket shelf that obviously it's got to be safe to eat, and it can't be sort of rat infested and full of poisons. But I think it's quite questionable how much ultra-processed food is safe to eat. And they've been extremely good over the course of decades now at brainwashing people and pushing out campaigns to dupe people into think they're living healthily, when it's quite the opposite. It's normally a net by which to sort of get people addicted to their produce. First of all, in the sort of 80s and 90s, we had the low-fat phenomenon. We had all of these cereals which contain lots of sugars, ultra-refined carbohydrates, which are extremely bad for insulin levels being marketed to us as you've got to eat these, it's good for your health. Special K had that eat 2 bowls of our cereal every day to lose weight, for crying out loud. That can't be a nutritionally balanced diet. And then we had the whole sort of push for things like margarines, low-fat mayonnaise, when what we have learnt latterly is good proper animal fats can actually lower cholesterol levels, and all of these things that they use to supplement to give mouthfeel and texture to low-fat produce are potentially things clogging up our colons and creating bowel cancers. And I think that the problem we've had is we've allowed big food to just behave in this lawless, unregulated way. We focused all our attention on things like tobacco without realising actually that one of the biggest dangers and the things that people are consuming the most of isn't necessarily cigarettes, but it's, you know, ready meals and frozen meals. They're at it again now, of course, pushing the whole vegan thing, because I don't think anything made, you know, by whatever big manufacturer that's a vegan katsu curry has anything in there you want to eat. And what we're not doing is teaching people how to make food last. The other day, my mate Will and I bought a turkey thigh, $6.99 it was, down Tesco. Big blimming thing. We made from that. We roasted it on the first night and sort of filled ourselves to the point of saturation. There was so much left over, we made a pie. After the pie, there was so much left over, I made pasties and gave the guy painting my house one of them. Then there was big bone left over that I was able to make souk and stock from. That turkey thigh for $6.99, I kid you not, James, I kid you not, I could have fed a family for 3 days in a row from one turkey thigh.
This is something I've been talking about a long time. I think it's sort of, it was born into me. You know, I grew up on a farm. It's kind of, we learn to, you know, appreciate the sort of fruits of our labour. You know, it's from the field to the fork. And part of that isn't just obviously about, you know, the things we consume inside ourselves and healthy eating, but it is that point you've mentioned. It's about, I think we need a national conversation. Jimmy Alton tried to do this a few years ago about not just what we're consuming, but about cooking and actually spinning it out a bit. So I agree, I do it all the time. You cook a roast, you know, that's going to be quite pricey, but then incrementally it becomes cheaper because, as you said, then you put some of it into a stew, or there's some of it into sandwiches, or some of it into some soup, and it spins out 3 or 4 meals. And it's up to individuals to then sort of understand, you know, not just about what is the right thing to eat, but what is the right thing to cook and how you can actually save money in the long term by spinning it out a bit. I think there's going to be another conversation that we have to have, and that is about an appreciation and support for our farmers.
Yeah.
Because at what sort of crazy stage do we get to with governments that they sort of decide that, okay, what we're going to do is punish our farmers? You know, the 2 most important things, I think, bedrock of our society is food security and energy security, and we have a Labour government that's willfully destroying both, to the point that farmers are now facing horrendous inheritance tax and the prospect of a zero-sum game of selling up to get, you know, money in to pay for this 10-year period of paying the inheritance tax. So you've got that bit. You've also got a lack, I think, of public understanding of the importance of farming and what they do every single day. They to provide fresh food. You've got supermarkets on the other side ripping off farmers, giving them pittance, handcuffing farmers because of supply, the mass supply, the farmers are reliant on supermarkets buying their goods but at cheap prices. And then the consumers on the other side getting ripped off. And you put all that together with a lack of education and understanding about what is good and healthy and sustainable and how to cook and spin it out during a cost of living crisis. It's a really, really important debate. And I think Britain's really struggling on this right now. Some of the figures are shocking in terms of obesity and also about ultra-processed foods. The figures are way worse than any other European country. And if we want to talk like governments do about protecting the NHS, as they did a few years ago, they need to have a very honest conversation about people's lifestyles and the benefits of understanding the relationship from the field to the fork of what is healthy and what is unhealthy.
I totally agree. And actually, you know, I'm so glad I was brought up, never allowed to go, not never allowed, every now and then might have had a McDonald's, but I just wasn't brought up with any of those things. My mum cooked every meal fresh. She says
it's
she
our
hates cooking.
Dickensian upbringings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she says she hates cooking, is a bad cook, but actually she's very good at it. And we had proper healthy food. We had to eat it. My mum and dad grow loads of veg in the back garden. They always, now I live back in the Shire, bringing me over there. Oh, their beans are the best. Their runner beans are just mwah, manna from heaven. But I was brought up on, you know, eating proper food, and I love, as an adult now, I love eating a bit of cartilage. I love a good bone. I like some skin. I love a bit of offal, and all of these bits, the cheaper parts of meat, I think are personally extremely good for you. That's why we got big grinding teeth and canines. We're supposed to be getting involved with a bit of carcass. And I just wish that young kids now were retaught how to have a relationship with their food, like I learnt at my grandma's knee.
I think that's a very good point, and I think it's something that I've been doing with a campaign that I've set up called No Farmers, No Food. It's not just about, you know, bad government policy to support farmers. It's also about that relationship, as I keep saying, from the field to the fork. And part of that should be tearing up these massive corporate contracts that are going into hospitals and schools and replacing it with supply contracts with local fresh food from local farmers into schools and into hospitals. That would help the health of the nation. And also, in the case of schools, put it back in the curriculum. Cooking, growing your own. So that, again, there's a practical application which leads to understanding about the whole process of growing food and what is good, healthy food versus bad food. And that then would have a knock-on effect possibly regarding child obesity and lowering the numbers.
Yeah. And like I said, I think the cheapest stuff for me is the tastiest stuff, and very often is the healthiest stuff. I say bring back faggots. I blimmin' love a good faggot from a butcher's shop. Amazing things. Where have they gone? I mean, I still buy them. I think I'm probably the only person of my generation who does.
Well, I mean, it's each to their own, and I think it's about freedom of choice, isn't it, in terms of what people consume? I mean, my whole thing is, again, we're all products of our upbringing, and I was lucky enough in my upbringing to be sort of completely embroiled in farm culture, and I understood, you know, in terms of what is involved in producing the nation's food. But I also understood about what is involved in terms of what is healthy to eat and how, you know, the enjoyment. I love cooking, and that was instilled in me at a young age as well. But there is a bigger debate about, can't we get to the point whereby there's a national campaign where everyone realizes that it is good to cook, it is good to try different things, and it's not necessarily hugely expensive. Take the whole debate about farm shops. And I know it's more difficult in cities, but there's always supermarkets more convenient and also less expensive. Well, that difference between supermarkets and farm shops is really narrowing, because you can get, and it's also the food that you're getting in farm shops a lot better. So I think what we need to do is have a conversation not just about supporting farmers in terms of their work, but also supporting ourselves in terms of, you know, learning those great lessons about how to cook properly, what is nutritious food, and also moving away as much as possible from some of the major supermarkets, if, for instance, farmers aren't getting a good deal, but also if consumers are getting ripped off. And we're at a point now with this sort of another cycle of inflation. Normally happens with inflation that it's an overheating economy, buy luxury goods too much. This one is different, and it's really worrying because it's essential goods and services that are going through the roof. You've got energy, you've got water prices, but in particular right now, food. And the knock-on effect, because there's always collateral damages to things like this, and the knock-on effect of this will be, once again, people will start making some choices to cut back possibly on the healthy stuff and go for more unhealthy stuff. But within that, people can still help themselves and actually learn the whole process of what is good food, what is bad food, and also cooking more meals that can spin out across the week.
No, I totally agree. And I think, you know, like a while ago, it became trendy for adults to do colouring in for their mental health. Go and cook something. Because that, for me, is my version of therapy. I'm never happier than I am wielding a knife in a kitchen. James, it's been wonderful catching up with you. Thank you so much. I thought we were going to talk about other things, but we just went big on the food stuff, and quite happily too. I think it's a really important topic of conversation. I've been banging on about this for forever. If you listen to my shows, I'm always talking about my stock pot. Here's my little secret, right? So, whisper it quietly. I'm actually 41 years old. In fact, I'm now brushing up against 42. And I don't look too haggard. Some of you might disagree. Some of you might think, actually, she looks like she's had a pretty tough paper round. But I kind of think that I'm holding it together okay. And I put it down to collagen. And I don't get all these funny, you know, salmon, sperm, marine supplements or something like that. I'm not bothering with all of that stuff. No. I know better than to be hoodwinked by these people and their crazy supplements. Because all the supplements that you go and buy from your health food shop, you can get out of food. And I think one of the greatest things on planet Earth is chicken skin. If you're one of those people who goes, I don't eat the skin because it's unhealthy, what are you doing? Whatever you do, whenever you buy chicken, buy it with the skin on. Even if you don't want to cook the skin, take the skin off and then lay it all out on a grease-proof piece of paper, whack it in the oven at quite a high temperature, you know, 180, 190, maybe a bit more if you're fantasistic, a bit less, and cook that bad boy down to make like crisps. And munch those because they're really high in good fat, the sort of good animal fat that lowers cholesterol, really high in omegas, really high in all your lovely sort of vitamin Bs and all of that stuff which you need for immune support and bone health and skin health. And here's my tip, ladies. Really high in collagen. So save yourself a few quid, not spending 25 quid a month down boots getting some sort of like weird marine collagen made in some lab in Taiwan. Just eat chicken skin. There's the Alex thought of the day. Okay, right, after the break, it's time for your thought of the day. So do please call me up because I'd love to hear from you. 03444991000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate. Faith is standing at the ready. You can use that number as well to squeeze in a final WhatsApp message, or even if you want to lay me down a voice track and ping that one over. That'd be great. 8722 is the number to text me. Remember to write the word talk before you text, and I will see you on the other side of this.
Nigel Farage only a few months ago was saying tow the boats back to France. He's realised you can't do that because he hadn't thought through the plans. What Kemi Badenoch has said, she wants to think through his plans properly. She's got Lord Wolfson, who's one of the most eminent lawyers in the country, looking at the implications of leaving the ECHR. Nigel Farage has shifted from where he was before. We'll just tow the boats back to France. We told him that wouldn't work. He then adopted pretty much our entire policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello Hello, welcome back. You know, Samara and I were just talking then about how in this show we sort of ventured into the unknown. We've broken a few boundaries, explored a few different thematic frontiers. And if you're going to give a title to this programme on YouTube in a Friends-esque way, it should be called The One with Bone Broths and Narcissism. What a combination, huh? Huh? That's better than news, isn't it? I've had fun talking about it. I do like talking about all sorts of random stuff. And apparently so have you quite enjoyed it. Now here's an interesting one. Good evening, Alex. Love the crew at Talk. I love them too. They're my family. I don't know if everyone is so blind to the food crisis. It's not just the prices that have skyrocketed, but the quantity has gone down. And they've been so cunning with it, bit by bit, gram by gram, pack by pack. Oh, I saw that air they pump into the crisps. You know, you open what looks like a big packet of crisps and there's just like 2 shards of potato in it. And you're like, what's that about? But it's interesting you mentioned that because everybody in journalism knows that if you want to describe how big something is, the official unit of measurement is either a city the size of Sheffield or Wembley Stadium, right? Or if it's about, you know, sort of actual scale and size, double-decker buses. But if it comes to the official journalistic unit of inflation, everybody knows that's the Freddo, right? You know Freddo? Those little, like, frog chocolate things made by Cadbury that once upon a time were 10p. I don't know how much they are now, but it ain't 10p anymore. And everyone knows that the official unit of inflation in journalistic circles is the Freddo. Remember that. OK, let's now speak to Mark, who's in South Wales. Hello there, Mark.
Hi, Alex. Great to see you back, and I absolutely agree with you about cooking. I love it.
Oh, isn't it lovely? Honestly, it keeps me sane. You know, when my other half says, oh, no, don't worry about cooking tonight, I want you to relax. I'm like, this is how I relax. Give me back the knives.
Yeah. Well, anyway, as Elvis Costello said, don't start me talking. I could talk all night, so I'll try and stick to the subject. The ECHR. Now, my first instinct is yes, day one is when reform get in, to feel it. But then I've been thinking about it, thinking, gosh, that is such an opportunity for the great and the good and the blob and the House of Lords and all the pearl clutchers to really try and delay things and put a spoke in the wheel. And then, as other commentators have said, really, the Good Friday Agreement is a problem. Tony Blair, damn him, ran around putting the ECHR in absolutely everything, including the Good Friday Agreement. And really, nobody wants to get involved in Irish politics, Alex. That is a thorn bush you do not want to stumble into. So there is, I think, an alternative. I mean, day one, obviously repeal the Human Rights Act 1998, and then do a very, very simple, as short as possible, in as plain language as possible, little law that says something like, as of 1st of July 2029, the European Convention on Human Rights no longer applies to United Kingdom immigration, asylum or deportation policy, and no previous case law or precedent arising from the ECHR may be used in any legal proceedings, or something like that. You'd have to have a lawyer write it, not just some guy sitting up in Blind Arrow in the valleys. But I think that should be enough to get things started. And if it works, and if you can carry on under that, then you can get all the constitutional lawyers and the experts in to look at the Good Friday Agreement. Because let's remember, we're not just looking at the North and the South, we've got the EU. And do you know what the EU's favourite hobby is, Alex? Giving Britain a punishment beating. And they will delay and delay. They will put forward proposals that nobody could ever accept. Just reject whatever we say out of hand, and it'll be a nightmare. If they could keep that process going for an entire parliament, it would be like all their Christmases had come at once.
They'd love it, wouldn't they? Finally, those people who just swan around Brussels going out fine dining would have something to do. I'm no legal expert. I would never claim to be. I don't know the validity of sort of just saying ECHR is disapplied to immigration. Maybe that will work. Maybe I literally don't know. I couldn't tell you whether or not that is a thing. If it is, that'd be great. But the difficulty is whatever route whoever goes down to try and dismantle the sort of intricate spider's web, the Gordian knot of human rights legislation that is anything but about human rights, are going to come up against such vitriolic opposition. Do you know, perhaps actually, if I was Reform UK, one of my first acts of Parliament, if I had a massive majority in Parliament, would just be to get rid of the House of Lords. They're going to be a problem, right? Because there ain't no Reform Lords in there. The House of Lords is going to be a problem. So I'd just be like, right, bye then, abolish that. Yeah, I mean, I would, just sort of have a flood the zone attitude, which is what Donald Trump did with his first few days in power. He didn't just go and going to do mass deportations. He threw everything at it, you know, international peace deals, tariff wars, mass deportations, getting the federal guard in to, like, you know, root out criminality in the big cities. It's called flooding the zone. So what you do is you give your opposition so many things that they cannot indulge over just trying to stop Brexit, because it's all going on all over the shop. So I think that that would be a very sensible modus operandi as well. Mark, thank you ever so much for your call. Lovely talking to you. Let's speak now to Peter, who's in Surrey. Hi there, Peter.
Alex, I am so delighted to speak with you. We haven't spoken before, and I loved your dual slot with Isabel. That was great fun.
Oh, she's great, isn't she? I love Isabel.
Yeah, that was good. I originally phoned up about the issue women face. I mean, particularly today with different populations coming into the country, and as an old git, my eyes were recently opened when I checked out Women's Safety Initiative, which is a charity, and I didn't realise just how hellish it is for women and young girls in today's society.
Yeah, do you know what's really interesting? Because I've been banging the drum for sort of women's safety and how dreadful it is in the modern era for quite some time now. And actually, you know, talking about importing all these men from fundamentally cultures is just one part of the spectrum of risk now at women. Perpetrators of the uncomfortable stares, of the catcalling, of the shouting, of the getting too close in your personal space, of the persistence. Because actually, you know, that is the thing that really, to me, marks the difference between your homegrown flirt and your person from a different culture. Your homegrown flirt, but all right, love, you know, you can nice, you can have your number. You're like, whatever, son. And they just leave you alone. The men from other cultures persist. And that is something that you don't. British men don't do that. You say to the British man, "Go away," not like, "Oh, what a human," but they don't keep following and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and that's what these men from other cultures do. Anyway, I digress. Most men don't see this because the thing is, if you're with a man, they don't approach you. They selectively pick out women who they think that they'll get a free run at. If they're with a man, they're not going to go near her, and especially younger girls. You know, I'm an old bat now, and I get it. I wonder what some of these 14-year-olds go through. And what's even more alarming, I had a couple of lovely girls phone me up on last night's programme, saying it's terrible that you're saying all that these, you know, these migrants are all sexual harassers. And I was like, no, it's not all of them. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that men from vastly different cultures and countries, many of which I've actually travelled to and seen with my own eyes, will have a very different attitude towards women, and I'm worried about you. And they said, oh, wow, but it's our fault what we did. These poor people are victims, and it's because Britain invaded Iraq. And I think it is so dangerous, because the very girls we need to be teaching in today's society to really have their wits about them, to listen to their gut instinct, to prickle when their hairs stand up on the back of their necks. We're instead telling them to dismantle those facilities of self-protection. We're instead gaslighting them into saying, if you see these men who've come over on boats, be extra nice to them. You've got to go out of your way to accommodate them, or you're a bad person. And if at any point your gut instinct is telling you he's being a bit funny, don't listen to that, because that probably means you're a racist. We're actually reprogramming and rewiring the very fundamental biological, psychological, inbuilt, God-given mechanism that should serve as their common sense and self-protection. And that, to me, is so dangerous.
I agree. And what spurred me to call you tonight, Alex, because you're having this conversation and it's been going on for a while, I had to interact with a female acquaintance last night on Facebook who is a terrible lefty, and she was saying after the Reform press conference, you know, it plays into the fascist playbook. It divides, and other people and those who look different, live differently, love differently. We need to start working out to make, and blah, blah, blah. And I just said, you know, maybe you need to interact with some of these other women's supports groups, such as the one I mentioned, which is the Women's Safety Initiative. And you'll learn that women in the UK, and particularly around London and around immigration hotels, are scared to leave their homes, and are scared even to wear a pretty dress on a summer's day.
Yeah.
For fear of being singled out as easy beat and asking for it, etc. It's disgusting, and you should stop apologising for young men who've broken into this country, our home, who hold us in utter contempt and who scare the heck out of girls and women.
I mean, look, I totally agree with you. Do you know, I'm going to say something that is controversial within the sisterhood, and I love the sisterhood. I'm the first person. I hate the word feminist, but I'm a fighter for women, right? I will stand up for any woman. But I think we've also done a great disservice to our young girls, because we have also sold them a false narrative about sexual empowerment. We have been telling young girls for too long now that owning your own body, dressing how you like is your right, and it's a living. Now, I'm not saying go put on a burqa because you've got all these men coming down from Syria, but what I am saying is, you know, girls need to understand actually that, you know, the sort of narrative being propagated by the likes of Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue, the hypersexualization that has come out of porn culture, idolizing the Kardashians, who are literally made on a surgical table pumped full of pharmaceuticals, you know, to essentially sell sex. They don't act, they don't sing, they don't dance, they don't play sports. They're just creatures that have been made by a pharmaceutical company to fetishize over. This isn't good. This is not good. And I would like it, actually, to see a little bit more, you know, like I was told, you can't go out like that with that skirt that short. I actually think a little bit of decorum and decency would go a long way as well. And that isn't me being a prude. It's not me being old-fashioned. It's certainly not me being anti-women's rights. It's me being a pragmatist and just saying, do you know what, as a woman, especially as a young girl, you sometimes don't know the power that you have. You sometimes might want to have people, you know, twizzle their heads to look at you. But be very careful how you use this, because it can be dangerous, particularly if you're dressing older than your age, particularly if you do not have the wherewithal and the life lessons learned to be able to look after yourself and be able to regard risk with an appropriate level of aversion. And I think that we've gone too far in our culture, frankly, when it comes to hypersexualization. But that is a whole other conversation for another day. Thank you ever so much for your call, Peter. Should we take a short break now? And when I come back, guess what? It's even more calls. The number 03444991000 is live and active, and I'm looking forward to speaking to some more of you just after this.
Nigel Farage, only a few months ago, was saying toe the
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're talking about everything today, aren't we? We first thought it was just going to be bone broths and narcissism. Now it's hypersexualisation, the blights of pornography. And I'm going to take you to the world of jewellery. Right? Didn't expect that one, did you? I'm going to do it because Caroline in Southport said she likes my necklace. Thank you, Caroline. I've got to tell you about this because this is my little, like, you know, personal little brag here. This bad boy, right, is actually ancient Egyptian. I'm not kidding you. It's all ancient Egyptian beads. These little monsters are 4,000 years old minimum. Now, I was down at my local antique shop sniffing around because it's a good antique shop too, and my house looks like a sort of weird Edwardian curios collection. And I saw this and I'm like, yeah, what are they really? And he said, yeah, this guy's an actual Egyptologist. You can Google him, the little certificate, da-da-da-da-da. I was like, I'm going to have me some of that. Anyway, don't get too excited, or maybe do get excited, because believe it or not, all those people sniffing about the pyramids, ancient Egyptian beads are everywhere. There's loads of them. They're not actually that hard to get hold of. So get yourself one because they're actually not expensive at all. You can easily go and get yourself some restrung ancient Egyptian beads and make like Alex and have some sort of like Cleopatra, you know, aesthetic going on. But there you go. Thank you so much for your message, Caroline. They are, like I said, ancient Egyptian. Google it. And then really, they're really not expensive. But a pretty cool thing, huh? I quite like that. Channeling the sort of, you know, my ancestors, not that I've got anything to do with Egypt. Right, okay, let's get back to, let's do some voice notes, shall we? Because I haven't played any yet. This is Aid.
We all say that Starmer and the Labour government haven't got a clue. I think the plain and simple fact is they're not thick, they're not unintelligent, they're scheming, conniving, know exactly what they're doing, and quite frankly, they've got a blatant hatred for this country and for all that we stand in. And they are hell-bent of completely destroying our way of life. Unless they go in 4 years' time, if not before, we're all done for.
Yeah, do you know what? Some of them are indeed quite conniving and intelligent, although I think Sir Keir Starmer's very intelligent, but I don't think he's particularly a political animal. I don't think he gets politics. But let's be fair, some of them on that front bench are absolute boneheads, right? I mean, some of them you wouldn't even have babysit your dog, would you? Let's hear now from Hev.
The big supermarkets, when they turned out and they said that they supported the farmers. No, they don't. They never have done. They support their own pockets, their own profits. They've never supported the farmers. They make deals with the farmers at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the crop or whatever. And then every time the prices go up in the supermarket, the farmers see none of that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The supermarket price wars, which have actually artificially lowered some of the cost of produce. I think as consumers, we are partly to blame, though, as well, because we all sort of go to the supermarkets and buy from the supermarkets and feed the machine, when actually, you know, we could all learn our lesson and go to the farm shop or go to the local butcher, support a proper English industry, or Welsh or Scottish, whoever you may be. And it is going to cost more, but then learn how to make it last. I think that we are all in part to blame for taking those shortcuts and contributing to the capitalist behemoth that is the supermarket polygopoly. Right, let's now speak to Scott, who's in Essex. Hello there, Scott.
Hello, Alex. Hope you're having a good evening.
Good evening to you. You on the move, son?
Always am. I'm always working. I never stop.
Good man.
All the people that are messing up this country.
I know. Do you know, I always think it gets to this time of the show and I'm like, oh, I'm no longer earning money. I'm paying for a migrant. Way.
Well, I hope I get through the next part without getting tongue-tied or losing the track. It's mainly along the lines of we do not need to leave the ECHR or ban any of the human rights things. We just need to impose a very simple law. The right to be a refugee or asylum seeker is on the proviso of being tolerant to this country and its residents and abiding by our laws. Violating those two statements immediately rescinds your right to be a refugee or asylum seeker within this country. And depending on the nature of the crime you commit, your eviction can be mandatory. And if it's very severe, permanent. Now, we've got two options then. We can send them back to their country of origin or the country that they came to here from. Now, that latter one would be France, Ireland. I'm not sure if any other countries are responsible for it. So we can put them out to those countries and say, right, to non-violate the individual criminal's human rights, who has violated the human rights of British citizens, residents and visitors to this noble island, they have to be expelled. And if France then tries to send them back to us, well, we'll take the second option, the country of origin.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to have deportation agreements, technically, by law, unless we're going to just sort of, you know, push these people out the back of a Airbus 400 or something, parachutes, and go like, oh, there you go, just land on the beaches there. But I do agree with you. If you come to this country as our guest and you've broken the law, then you should be deported, and I don't think you should ever return. You know, if you just stay one day over your visa in America, that's it, you're blacklisted. They don't really have a high level of tolerance for this, and I don't know why as a nation we've become so weak on this front. So I think you make an extremely pertinent point there. Scott, I can hear that you are driving. Are you one of our wonderful lorry drivers? Are you a trucker?
No, I'm a computer engineer. I fix the systems that run the radio, the TV, and all the banking equipment.
See, I was hoping you might be a lorry driver, because I've got a penchant for lorry drivers, given that my dad was one. I think they're amazing men. But you know what, computer engineers, I'll probably need you one day, so I'll get Samara to keep your number, because the only thing I know how to do is Word 98. That was Scott in Essex, or wherever he may be, because he sounded like he's on the move to me. Right, let's speak now to Megan, who is in Derby. Hi there, Megan.
Hello.
Hiya, love. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Are you?
Yeah, I'm really well. What do you want to talk about?
I just wanted to talk about because you were talking to a lawyer about the grooming gangs a little while ago, and I've never been on here before, but I just wanted to put an observation across about how I sort of find it a bit hard to believe that it can't be traced back to who it was that, you know, like interviewed the victim, to find out why it's got no further, let's say.
Right. Yeah, so when it comes to people who might have been willfully covering up or abrogating their professional duty in failing to properly deal with the victims of grooming gangs and the perpetrators of those heinous acts, you think we should be able to single out individuals and hold them accountable?
Yeah, 100%. Because I know if it was my dad, I know he'd be really, really angry about it, and I know that he'd want the person that has done this to be brought to justice. And I think that somewhere down the line, it's being closed down and it's being shut down, and these people aren't getting the justice that obviously they deserve. And obviously
for somebody.
Yeah, the book stops for somebody.
Do you know, I think, you know, one thing that is definitely true is if you worked in the private sector and you screwed up your job as much as some of these people in public-facing offices have done, you'd be out. You'd not be getting the promotion. You'd not be getting the golden handshake. You'd be lucky to even take home your pension. And yet there does seem to be, whenever people get things wrong in the civil service, whenever people get things wrong in the whatever it might be, it seems to me that these people, especially bureaucrats, face absolutely no consequences for their negligence or their bad decision making. And I don't necessarily think the right way, because we were talking about the fact that there's such an ingrained culture for decades now on taboo and on censorship and on don't do this, don't upset the apple cart, that there'll be a lot of people who essentially have just been brainwashed into not doing their jobs properly. And it's very hard to single those people out. But when it comes to the sort of people who are pumping this stuff out and making people sit these courses, and if there was ever any direct requirement, do not do this, do not take this forward, then absolutely those people must be held accountable. Whether that is criminally or otherwise, I don't know. But it's about time that people in the public sector who are paid for by us, who have a direct duty of care towards us, fulfilled their roles properly.
I think as a young girl, it makes me have no faith. I don't even want to walk out the street anymore.
I'm so
let
sorry.
alone, you know, if something happens, then I don't really have faith in our justice system anymore. Or, you know, if for these people that are meant to keep me safe, I don't really have faith in them anymore as a young girl. And I've never thought like that before.
It's really sad that that you feel like that, but I totally sympathise. Now, I've not been in a situation, I mean, I've had some pretty horrible things happen in this country, but I've never had to actually involve the police. But listening to some of the other stories I've heard from other females, when they've engaged the police to say this person was harassing me, this person was following me, this person was intimidating me, this person was making me unsafe. You have to have a pretty high threshold for the police to actually roll up their sleeves and do something. And yet, you know, you write some hurty words on social media and there they are, ringing your Ring doorbell. And you do have to wonder at what point they are actually going to take female safety seriously. Because I think in any civilised society in the 21st century, it should be paramount to the functioning of a well-oiled, progressive nation that women and girls are protected, and we've gone the opposite direction, and it just beggars belief. Megan, I hope tonight, sit there, take stock, have a deep breath. You're not alone. We're going to pray for you. We're going to think of you, and thank you so much for calling the programme. I really, really do appreciate it. I think we've got to squeeze in one more commercial break. Yes, they're nodding thumbs up. Indeed, I do. So let's do that now, because girl got to get paid, and you might want to buy some of this stuff. I don't know. I'll see you afterwards.
Implications of leaving the ECHR. And Nigel Farage has shifted from where he was before. We'll just tow the boats back to France. We told him that wouldn't work. He then adopted pretty much our entire policy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Right, shall we hit up the phone lines and see who's on the blower? It's Louise in Lincolnshire. Hi there, Louise.
Oh, good evening, Alex. Lovely to speak to you. Stayed up for you.
Oh, lovely to speak to you, my darling. What is on your mind?
Well, it's about all these illegal immigrants and the young girls. What happens when they get so frustrated there's more attacks? Because that's what's going to happen, because no woman in the right mind is going to go out with one of these guys, are they?
Yeah, I mean, we are sort of essentially creating a powder keg of a situation, it seems to me. And it's very difficult to know what the answer is going to be. We can stop the situation now if the government had the will and the wherewithal, and I don't think they've got either. But it's going to be incredibly difficult for some of these men who have come across to somehow reprogram their brains to teach them how to do things in the West.
I don't think you can do. I mean, it's in their genes, isn't it? It's what they've been taught.
Right, exactly. In the same way that if I went to live over in Saudi Arabia, it would take me a long time to learn that I've got to go out, you know, completely concealed, that I'm not supposed to do this with my right hand, or eat like this, or do that, or go to this, or say that, or, you know, whatever. It would take me a whole world to try and learn that stuff. And it'd be very difficult to try and make me follow that behaviour, because it'd feel totally unnatural.
No, but when you go abroad, if you're a normal person, you look up what you're supposed to do and not supposed to do.
Yeah.
That's what normal people do.
Well, that's certainly what we do as normal people in our own culture. But this is the point, isn't it? You know, we do have different cultures. We celebrate this whole diversity, and isn't it wonderful, and the richness of all this difference and diversity. And then when it comes to sexual mores, we're supposed to pretend that actually there isn't a diversity. Everyone just follows the same rule book. Nothing to see here. Just because you've been brought up in that country doesn't mean you're going to treat women differently. And it's like, well, you can't have it both ways. Either there is diversity or there is not.
Yeah, it's rubbish. Absolute codswallop.
Yeah, no, I agree. Louise, my darling, thank you ever so much for your call. That was Louise in Lincolnshire, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see if we can get through some messages before we welcome in the incredible Petri Hoskin, who's going to be looking after you into the wee small hours of tonight. I just wish the London bubble would talk to the rest of the country. We don't care about them anymore. Well, here you go. I'm sort of in the London bubble, but I have come from the West Country. I've repenetrated the skin of the London bubble, and I'm back in it, trying to talk to all of you out there. Good evening, Alex. Love the crew at Talk. So do I. There you go, everybody behind the glass there. You're doing sterling work. The unsung army of incredible people behind me who put this show together. They're brilliant. We've got Titus there, we've got Samara, we got Sam, we got Faith. We love them all. Honestly, they're such a great bunch to work with. I've never worked actually in such a happy environment. That was actually the case until I worked with a very special young man called Jake back in my old employers. He made every day a wonderful day.
He makes every day for me a wonderful day.
Because it's Petri's son. I tell you, I used to work with Petri's son, Jake, and he is he's just the funniest man on earth.
He is honestly he's my favourite human, but he is an adorable man.
He really is.
Really is.
You did good, girl.
Yeah.
Now, what have you got coming up?
Right. Not so good. We've got the Sun exclusive.